Shoot and dodge, shoot and dodge. That was the routine of his experimentation to see if anything they could create could hurt the monster in the sky as Thera burned unheard of levels of mana. To the point that Ben had to create light enchanted bands partway into their testing just to speed up her recovery. His first round of experiments had been aimed to see if the creature would show any particular reaction when hit with any of Thera's spells, but as she switched between weakening dark spells to complex life ones and combined options like the petrification she was skilled at, not one worked. It was like it had a body that rejected the magic of the universe, which for all Ben knew might have been true. That led to a different attempt to look for some sort of reaction against any of the natural elements of the world. But after weaving his mind into Thera's to help her materialize each and every one, he didn't see any different result. The creature still reacted, but as if it was dealing with a minor annoyance instead of a genuine threat, and that lack of attention on them left it to continue drifting across the sky at a speed they needed to rush to keep up with. With that failure as well, he moved on to his next round of testing, one far harder to pull off as he attempted to see if it would react to any particular forms or configurations of mana that Thera couldn't pull off herself, leading him to get her to rip spheres of stone from the ground as he poured his own mana into enchanting on each of them before they were blasted out. Again with almost no effect as he struggled to figure out what to do from there. It hasn't shown any variance in reaction to the regular mana or matter of the universe, nor any of the enchantments I've added. Where does that leave us? I could try to make antimatter again and likely blow the two of us up too in the process, so I don't really love that idea. Plus, just because it reacts violently to the typical matter of the universe doesn't mean I have any reason to believe it will act differently on this thing when I don't even know what it's made of. Hell, for all I know it's not even charged in any normal way. So then what? I just got this new handy rule bender skill. Assuming this thing is properly made of foreign matter, maybe it will show some reaction against different forms of foreign matter. Could that be something? Of course, it's still going to have the same issue ID expect for using antimatter. For one, the quantities ID want to make to attack it would 100% blow us up too, which isn't really ideal. Not much point in saving the world if I need to die to do it, and just as importantly, let the gods off the hook for paying me back for my service. I just know those cheap assholes aren't going to pass on anything I earn to my next of kin. Not that I have any of those on the planet. Which reminds me, I really should get around to making a will at some point. Kind of late for that now though. Okay. Back on topic, where does that leave me? If I look at the big-ass pile of magic materials ID just discovered, I could hypothetically get Thera to create maybe 55 of them between all of the non-affinitied options and her 3 affinitied ones, with only the small issue of the fact that I don't know what almost any of them do. Suddenly really wishing I'd properly taken a few days to try and study them myself instead of just tossing it off to the crafting gods to research. Damn it all, I need something. He felt the pressure building as he looked around. While Thera had the mercy of being blinded for her own safety, Ben was left looking between the beast and its casual destruction. Each swipe they avoided left canyons in the ground as the air was filled with dirt and shook the lands for miles around. Even if it seemed to take no effort from the unnatural being, getting hit would be a death sentence. It made him want to grab at his skull from the lack of options. What could he even do? He could keep trying different arrangements of matter in the hopes that one would show any reaction when struck against the body of the monster, but he doubted it would make any difference at that point, and he wasn't left with much hope for enchantments either. Stop thinking about pointless stuff. If it's alive, then it can die. Just keep testing till something works. Unauthorized content usage. If you discover this narrative on Amazon, report the violation. They'd only been at it for a couple hours. No reason to think a solution would present itself so soon, so he did his best to keep his mind sharp, getting ready for a long haul. File. Damn. Next test then. What do I have left I can think of? Had gotten to the point that he had even given in to testing as many of the unknown magic materials Thera could create which hadn't worked either, bringing him to the point where he had to question if he was really going to risk it all by trying to make either antimatter or foreign matter, with both options feeling like a nightmare as all of the minds in his head that weren't rushing to guide Thera, so they wouldn't be hit, were focusing on trying to figure out how to make either of those completely unviable options even a little bit safer. It was like he had the instructions to make a couple of nukes living in his head but couldn't put them to work without catching himself in the blast radius, so where did that even leave him? Damn it, there's a couple more things I can think of for completeness sake, but if none of those options can manage, then I might have to do it. Damn. As he prepared to resolve himself to create some of the most dangerous substances the universe had ever seen, he first filled Thera's mind with the instructions she'd need to create some that would be far less threatening. Not having her make it out of any real belief it would work, but instead as a way of putting off what was beginning to feel like the inevitable endpoint that all of his failed testing was leading to. Under the power of her non-affinity magic, Ben had her create a range of the world's gases, only frozen to a solidified state before shooting them out all at once, not having any hope that they'd give a different result from the rest he'd tested and making him less concerned with carefully observing them each as individual tests, only for that to be the time he got an actual change. Amongst the various frozen boulders of gas he had Thera fire off, one was caught by the creature. Not intentionally so much as through luck and chance as the monster's body continued to warp, with one of the ripples it went through taking it in before its flesh began to expand and blow out from the pressure created by the evaporating gas, finally showing Ben a potential path. A path that began by finally making the creature mad. All at once, more tendrils appeared than in any of his prior attempts, not just smashing down on the environment but instead once again smashing space itself, creating cracks in the fabric of existence itself as Ben rushed to make Thera evade, doing everything he could to make sure they'd survive now that the monster finally had a real target, them. But that's good, Ben thought to himself as he tried to keep just how life and death things had become from passing through the connection. It suddenly wants us dead, that implies we heard it, that's probably a good step forward, right? It was an attitude he was forcing himself to take as attacks swung down, with more than a few seeming to appear from nowhere. A limb hundreds of meters long appeared mid-swing mere feet from their face, forcing Ben to grab Thera and yank her down as the two hit the floor of the basket at the same time the tendril hit its rim, sending them flying through the sky while Ben smashed his head against the stone side, momentarily stunning him before he could help Thera get it back under control. By the time they did though, another was already on its way, making the two jerk into the air to avoid it as they were all but thrown into the sky in an attempt to escape while more appeared, trying to corner them at all angles. And probably succeeding. If this thing is somehow forcing more dimensions of space on reality than the universe normally has, then it's probably got us cornered in ways that shouldn't even exist. Myriad, please tell me you're around. We've got this thing's attention, now just point out where we can run so I can figure out how to start making use of that fact. Cool. Fingers crossed this works out then. At his direction, Thera shot them back, both smacking into the basket sides from so rapidly changing their direction as Ben got front row seats to seeing limbs phasing in and out of reality around them as they just barely passed through five trying to ensnare them, making him think they'd only just made it until the monster once again lashed out at space itself, not stopping as it cracked but continued on its assault against reality as a whole until even the cracks opened, letting Ben peek into eternity beyond. In both his current universe and his last, Ben had heard space described in a few similar ways. An endless expanse, a deep void, eternity itself, but all of those were wrong. When the monster opened a hole in the universe itself, Ben got front row seats to the true meaning of forever in the form of the primordial chaos searing itself into his mind as he bore witness to something nothing born of a universe should. That mad realm of constantly shifting rules in a plane between realities where any idea of physics was nothing more than a temporary suggestion. A mortal bearing witness to true chaos itself. It was both beautiful and horrifying as the sight ensnared him, trapping him more than any magic in the past could have as that same chaos seeped into him in return, leaving its fingerprints on his thoughts and tainting his existence while everything that he was began to be pulled in. It was like it was singing to him a song of potential, of opportunity to grow beyond the realm of gods or to fall lower than the meekest ants. To get the sort of power that would let him make the current fight and even the war for the fate of the planet look like nothing so long as he was clever enough. And if there was one thing it was clever. Hadn't he pulled himself up from nothing through planning and hard work? It felt like as long as he could figure out the depths of its nature, then he'd be able to find paths to power that could leave the divine at his feet. Myriad screamed again as all of his other attempts failed, this one finally snapping his apostle from his stupor and making him see what was happening. The two of them were on a collision course with that hole through reality, and as the one acting as their eyes, he needed to stop Thera from taking that final dive. "Thera, up!" he screamed with both his voice and mind, his disorientation making him put far too much of his thoughts into it as golden blood began to pour down Thera's nose. But she did as he yelled despite the strain his mind had put on her, letting the two narrowly avoid being trapped outside of reality itself as it began to close. What the hell just happened? He didn't have time to process any of that, even as his brain begged him to. They only had two goals, getting away and figuring out how to apply the knowledge that had enraged the beast to begin with. Even as his minds kept trying to slip back to the scene had witnessed, he kept forcing them back on track, not caring that he now had nearly 1,000 more than he had only the day prior as he looked at what happened and what it might imply. Focus. Stay on topic and think here. The first bit of damage we pulled off came from using a frozen gas. It pretty obviously looks like it couldn't handle the rapid expansion as it melted. How do I use that? The first idea to pop into his head was to just keep doing what had already worked once. And while he was willing to accept it if nothing better popped up, he wanted more options. Faster options. Even if that was the most damage they'd been able to do until that point, the monster they were facing was on a different scale. Who was to say how many times they'd have to attack that way to finally bring it down? That led him to looking at alternatives as his mind drifted to something that would equal the sort of rapid expansion he wanted. An explosion. One of Ben's greatest struggles in that universe was the fact that so many reactions seemed to be so much less energetic compared to those of his home reality, to the point that had long since given up on his past goal of making anything akin to gunpowder and was more than happy to use different configurations of magic as a substitute for any time he needed such a thing. Materials would still burn well enough, even a few of the elements had already made would combust once exposed to air, but he wanted something more. Something that would go boom. At first glance, that seemed to once again point back to the two options had been avoiding, both anti and foreign matter, with both of them acting plenty explosive to get the job done. This story has been taken without authorization. Report any sightings. But while both could have been perfect in the right conditions, neither would work for what they faced. Making antimatter might have given the reaction he craved, but it would be doing so in the air directly in front of them. Sure, he could have attempted to do the same thing he had during the first wave, encasing it in such a way that no stray atoms would be able to touch it, but that was something had only been willing to do with his subconscious fully at the wheel. His conscious mind thought better of such a mad, risky, and overall suicidal idea. And as for foreign matter, that would only stay together while there's power being poured into it, so again, given it would be being created directly in front of my face, I'm gonna say no. Plus, that isn't even considering the mana cost. It was absolutely insane before, and I'm not expecting it to have gotten that much better just because of a few new skills. Which means I'm left with a different experimental option if I don't want to be doing this the slow way, as this thing slowly wears us down or succeeds in getting us to fall out of reality itself. Great. That option involved going farther down the periodic table than he ever had before when it came to his materialization, so far that he was looking at things that shouldn't exist in the natural world, at least as far as the gray were concerned, and in theory, should result in a significantly less stable atom, one primed and ready to decay into pure energy. With "in theory" being the keywords. I've already seen the gray be wrong about a couple pretty significant aspects of reality at this point. Do I want to trust them to be right about this? Who am I kidding? What choice do I have? Feeling the weight that a lack of options gave, he gave a brief prayer before figuring out exactly how much farther beyond the world's natural 90 elements he would need to go before determining the structure it would need to have, and filled Thera's mind with that information. There was a lot to consider. It needed to be something that would have hypothetically been a gas if it could exist long enough so they could materialize it in an already low energy state to give them enough time to fire it off, while at the same time having a high enough decay rate that the moment it warmed up it would begin breaking down in the beast, both expanding the way the last gas attack had while at the same time unleashing massive volumes of energy all at once. But with all of that considered, that only left seeing if it would work. He merged more of his mind into Thera's, ignoring her discomfort as he got her to create 5 massive balls of the new substance before firing each off at different points, watching as 4 hit their marks and slid within the warping flesh just before Ben had the 2 shoot away into the distance, as far and as fast as they could while being chased, giving him the view he wanted of his plan working. In only a few seconds, massive tears ripped across the body of the beast, giving him the smallest of hopes that they'd done it. They'd won, right up until the thrashing started again, breaking the universe around them. Even as he watched it though, Ben wasn't feeling the same pull as he had the first time, the chaos beyond having already stained his mind as he forced Thera to evade, all while he noticed a different change thanks to the small clarity of thought. Reality was taking longer to repair itself. Just noticing that fact filled Ben's head with dread. He knew plenty about the universe, but he had no clue about anything when it came to it breaking down. The fact that it seemed to repair itself at all was a blessing, but was it repairing itself slower due to the last attack having more force behind it than he could see, or was it accumulating damage from everything that had been built up so far? And most important of all, is it only going to get worse as this goes on? I'd rather not take too long and discover this is going to break the whole of reality if I don't finish this quickly. As ridiculous as it sounded, that was beginning to feel more and more likely. The monster was in a panic and smashing space itself with gusto. Even if it wasn't going to break the whole of the universe, Ben felt more than justified in worrying that it could get so bad that their entire planet might fall through, with whatever consequences that would hold waiting to be discovered. He didn't mean for those worries to be passed on, but the effect glimpsing the chaos had on his mind was still lingering enough that it was affecting how much he could hide away, and without meaning to, some of his worries slipped through. "Ben, what do you need me to do?" Thera asked him, still deaf and blind to the world but trusting he'd be able to properly use her as a resource, with that same trust leaking through the connection and steadying him as he looked at the situation. Even as the beast rained down chaos around them, it felt like the last death cries of a cornered animal. Could do a lot of potential damage before its end, but he was sure it would get there, they just couldn't afford to be patient. So he looked at it, really looked at it, staring deeply into its damaged body, feeling his mind want to rebel against the previously hidden bits of the creature as he instead fell into his sacrilege, letting the instinct that came with it point him where to aim. They wanted to finish things off, which meant that they wanted to go big, so as Ben identified what he felt was the perfect target deep within his core, Thera began spending her mana, taking all that she had and under Ben's guidance, fired. As that final attack blasted through the sky, it lodged itself into the target, the monster unable to shake it free before it reacted. The frozen ball warmed up, expanding into pure gas that inflated the monster before it decayed further into energy, exploding outward as it shredded the beast, bringing an end to the destruction it wrought. Thera slumped beside him as he breathed a sigh of relief. Felt over, it felt complete. With the thing capable of tearing apart reality itself dead, it felt like the ghosts were the only thing left to worry about, but through it all Ben had forgotten one thing. Without something controlling it, foreign matter could behave unpredictably. When Ben had created the matter of his home reality, it had reacted explosively upon meeting the universe, bursting outward and warping space itself in a way that had even damaged the orichalcum armor he'd been wearing to protect himself. But the beast they'd just slain wasn't made of the sort of stuff that would naturally be found in either his current world or his last. It was instead a third type he hadn't previously encountered, and without a soul to dominate it, it was left to react to the physics around it. As kilometers of material were left to interact with reality itself, all at once the world was sucked in under the force of the massive implosion it created, taking both Ben and Thera with it as they were pulled through the air, being the closest victims to feel its effects. The fastest of Ben's minds pulled the rest of them to his same speed as he took in the situation before reaching out with Connect to link up with Thera, wanting to bring her mind to the same speed so she could use her power to deal with the severe situation they found themselves in, only to find something very wrong. No matter how he poked and prodded in her head, she wasn't responding. That set off a whole new wave of panic in him. He knew she was alive at least. He wouldn't have been able to connect with her otherwise, but couldn't tell why she wasn't thinking. Nor did that give him many options to figure out how to make sure they'd both survive the sudden situation they found themselves in as he looked at all he had at his disposal, finding that despite whatever situation she had to be in, Thera was still his greatest resource for ensuring they'd live through the ordeal. Given the severity of their situation, he didn't think she'd particularly mind either as he made use of the connection in a different way, reaching down into her reserves to pull out whatever mana he could for his own use, only once again to come up almost empty as he struggled to figure out where he was failing. While the experience of taking someone's mana was different from having someone pass theirs through him, with practice it became minimal. At his current level of deep connection, he could take an equivalent of half his current mana pool from someone at once and from there just keep taking that same volume again and again in a process that would typically overstrain his soul, but as he tried it on Thera he got almost nothing. A few stray points of the stuff at most as what was going wrong snapped into place. Mana exhaustion. Jesus, if we get out of this then that's gonna hit her like a brick. In that fight for the safety of the planet, Ben had been taking advantage of her raw strength liberally, getting her to materialize left and right while shooting out attacks and dodging incoming ones just as much, all in an effort to find a way to deal with the creature, and that was the result. He was being forced to see that despite how much power Thera had, it wasn't actually infinite no matter how she made it look, with her first time experiencing the condition coming at the worst possible moment, forcing him to look for other options of survival as they were pulled through the air. Even with her in that situation though, she still absorbed mana at a rate far faster than him, leading him to take the few points that were regenerated each second while he was left with his own strength as the source head have to turn to as he looked at what he could reasonably do while they were being pulled outward before he gave in to the best plan he could make and put it in motion. They were still in the basket they'd been flying in, and with the strength of his material manipulation, Ben poured out his mana to reshape it, looking at how it was being pulled through the air and stretching out the stone that made it up to create wings to both keep them from tumbling and create a smoother ride as he tried to predict what the best choice to do from there would even be. If the creature's body had collapsed into anything like a black hole, then that was just going to be the end of the planet, so he ignored that as an option. If there was nothing he could even theoretically do to stop it, then it wasn't worth considering. Instead, he looked at two other bits of potential and tried to assess the best course for either scenario. The first and worst option as far as he was concerned was that the body had some sort of self-generating sucking force that was going to pull everything in and keep pulling up to a certain range, not stopping until it was buried under a mountain of rubble. It was again a problem he wasn't sure he could deal with, less severe than the idea of a world-ending threat, but would still require him to be able to escape its pull if he wanted to survive, so he instead pinned his hopes on the second option. Still not great. He was forced to hope that the massive sucking force they were under was all the result of an intense implosion, and that once it stopped they'd all be safe enough, leaving the only issue being how he'd create a safe landing for the two. This content has been unlawfully taken from Royal Road. Report any instances of this story if found elsewhere. If I had some trees around I could try to hook one to slow us down. But yeah, that's not actually an option. The few glimpses of the surroundings were even more bleak than they'd been when dealing with the monster. The gorges its blows had created were left but looked so much more shallow from all of the topsoil being sucked in as well, with trees and shrubs flying through the air with the rest to the central point where it all converged while he did the only thing he could think of. He tried to bring them up higher, angling the wings to help with lift and once more reshaping the stone that contained them in an attempt to add propellers he could rotate with his magic to add to it. For the first time in a long time, Ben was cursing a lack of knowledge on his part as he desperately wished he'd studied up on aerodynamics a bit to give him whatever edge he could get to make such a hastily thrown-together craft function, only breathing the smallest sigh of relief when he felt it work. They were still being thrown forward through the air, but they were rising up, getting out of the way of so much of the debris flying around them as he did his best to make minor adjustments on the fly. They could only have been moving for a few seconds, but under the pressure and the strain of his mind, to Ben it felt like hours of quick tweaks and reactions to keep them afloat and alive, all the while dealing with the knowledge that even if he could think faster, his mana pool would only regenerate at one speed. Every little adjustment had its cost that he wasn't going to get back, and stealing the trickle of points Thera was taking in would only do so much. But he kept it up, rationing everything he could until they finally passed the epicenter of it all, and through the force he was putting into the propellers, used it to carry them forward as he noticed one small mercy. The strength of the implosion was weakening significantly, meaning it wasn't going to be a constant force he'd need to fight against, leaving only one final problem for him to deal with. Landing. Yep, we're going to die. They weren't outrageously high in the sky, but they were above where the treetops would have stood if any forest that had been there hadn't been completely devastated in the last few hours, far higher than anyone should be falling in a basket made of stone while his own mana was beginning to get low. Their fate felt inevitable. But even then he couldn't help but struggle to think of something. Anything he could do to let them walk away from that in the end as he compared his current skill levels to the barely 200 points of mana he had left before making a quick decision in the heat of desperation. With the points of mana he had left he ripped away maybe a forearm's worth of stone from their container and reshaped it into what could best be described as a comically large umbrella. Its canopy was 4 meters across and as thin as paper, only able to hold itself together thanks to Ben continuously running his mana through it to strengthen the entire thing beyond the limits of the material as he pushed his body to keep up with his mind. Feeling his muscles rip and tear as he grabbed Thera and held her tight before the two tumbled out of the basket as it was carried off, letting them fall down. And fall they did. His makeshift umbrella was slowing them down, sure. He would even say significantly so, but not so much that the landing wasn't going to hurt, as he did his best to protect Thera from the impact as much as he could while the strike rattled throughout his entire body, leaving him tremendously grateful for his various defensive skills, even as he felt his bones strain. But he did it, he survived. That fact made his heart pound against his chest as he let himself collapse to the ground and breathe, taking stock of everything before focusing on the next problem. His body hurt all over and he was nearly out of mana as well, but he could move if he wanted to and head regenerate back to his maximum level in just a few minutes. All he needed was to see if he was going to get his perfect victory. Myriad, your very sore, very tired, very fantastic apostle would very much like to hear that he succeeded on all fronts. Tell me there isn't some new eldritch god wreaking havoc in the heavens and that I've successfully sealed its soul away somewhere, please. The cube told him, relief plain on his voice. If you know a better way we could have done things, then keep it to yourself. Now on to my list of complaints. I deserve a mountain of titles for what I did but got none. Plus I still haven't heard a notification for my quest, which we still very much need to talk about, by the way. What gives? Myriad, what the hell are you talking about? That's not done yet. We killed the monster, we saved the day and the world and even the heavens by trapping its stupid soul. How much more done do you need? In the desolated area around them, with Thera still suffering from mana exhaustion, there was nobody around but Myriad to hear the string of curses that came out of Ben's mouth with the news that despite everything, this hadn't stopped being his problem yet. Already able to tell this was going to take a while, Ben picked up Thera before giving an accusatory order to the heavens. Explain. And I guess point me in whatever stupid direction I need to go. Again, Myriad, please explain why the hell I'm dealing with the rest of it? Give it to me straight. Am I the gods' whipping boy? You'll see a problem and think it can just be tossed on to poor, disposable Ben? Excuse you, just because my mind's a little more powerful than average doesn't make me not a normal person. Myriad went on, ignoring his apostle. What? Why me? There's no way you guys can't close it yourselves. Hell, you should have done something hours ago. Damn it all, fine. But I want any watching gods to know that I plan on calling this in as a massive favor one day. I deserve it, you cheap assholes. It took an hour of rushing through the destroyed lands and avoiding any ghosts they'd seen passing by to find an area the devastation hadn't touched, with another just as long to actually see people in the distance, with a small town that was clearly a source of the ghosts further off. And Ben was feeling the strain of getting there. His body was beaten and bruised, his muscles and bones hurt, and he was covered in no small number of cuts from everything that had been whipping through the air, with none of that even mentioning the strain head put himself under to get out there. Carrying Thera wasn't actually that bad. His strength was unreasonably high at that point, more so than what any normal person could expect. Same with his stamina, keeping the length of time he needed to carry her from being a bother either. No, what was causing him problems was his lowest attribute by far, his agility. After all of his awakenings and a constant supply of strengthening potions, Ben was actually far faster than any average person, even if Head never willingly put it to practice. But as things stood, he didn't have much of a choice but to run with all he had, if only so he could ensure the portal to hell would be closed even a few minutes faster. It was already obvious the world was going to be dealing with a ghost problem for a long time to come, maybe even long after the end of the war with the demons, regardless of who won. He was sure that the various light and death spirits in the world would be able to do something to whittle away at them all, but an entire planet was a big place with plenty to deal with. And anyway, that was something for the gods to deal with. It already felt like he was having extra work dumped on him after Head already volunteered to put his life on the line to help save the world. He would close the gate the second he could get there, which first meant Thera needed to be taken care of. Something that seemed to have already been dealt with, for as he was making his way to the group he could see in the distance, they were making their way to him, undoubtedly having already been told to expect him as the party met him in the middle and greeted him with a bow. Honored Apostle, the one who seemed to be in charge, said, "We were told there was someone you needed us to watch while you bring an end to this disaster. I take it that's her?" If you come across this story on Amazon, be aware that it has been stolen from Royal Road. Please report it. It is. Ben nodded as he carefully handed over Thera, talking in his head to his god at the same time. Myriad, keep an eye on her and make sure she's safe while I'm off dealing with this. Myriad, I'm leaving my unconscious girlfriend with a bunch of strangers so I can go save this stupid planet. You damn well make sure nothing happens to her or I will kill every person on this world. I will just one thing first. Okay, before I run off to heroically save the day, I don't suppose there's any healer among you, is there? I'm a light mage, one at the back volunteered. Great, in that case, do you mind? Ben asked, gesturing broadly at all of himself as the mage nodded and began trying to cast his magic. His brow wrinkling in concentration as nothing seemed to happen, leading Ben to connect to him and take a peek at his soul. 5th level, and seems like he probably has a pretty regular magic pool. Yeah, I don't have hours to waste here. I have been way too spoiled living with 2 awakened life mages. Myriad, just point me to where I need to go already so I can slink back off to Stonewall where I can beg Sonia to heal me. Myriad quickly gave Ben directions as his apostle gave up on being healed and instead went back to running, putting his all into getting to the town he could see in the distance and then racing through the empty streets, the residents still following the god's orders to stay inside and hide away. Through it all there were still some obvious signs of destruction. The outsider not having left the place untouched with the path it took to leave being marked by smashed houses and the damaged roads, the ground torn into by the same brutal strikes that they'd been forced to avoid as they'd faced off against the monster while Ben tried to ignore it. There was nothing he could do for the people who lived there. All he could do was give a brief prayer as he finally reached where he needed to be, the ruins that had once been a warehouse with a torrent of souls pouring out of it. It looked like something had burst out of it, which of course it had, the outsider having escaped its confines while ghosts were still escaping from the area and keeping Ben on edge. Without the outsider there to help control them, there shouldn't have been as much risk of danger from them with each one simply trying to escape their damned fate. But he wasn't so certain of that he was going to throw caution to the wind. Each one that passed him close enough by he connected to, feeling their minds and history and trying to get a sense of if he should fear any power that might be at their disposal, finding each safe enough in the end as he passed them by. He didn't give himself time to indulge in some of the more alien minds he was encountering, saving that for later as he climbed over a smashed wall to see what was within and bearing witness to the hell around him. Nearly 24 people stood in a circle with only a few gaps between them where bodies could be seen collapsed below. But just because there were gaps didn't mean they were empty. In their place stood more ghosts filling the role, still very much being controlled as Ben got to see the hell at their feet. Not the same as staring into the primordial chaos, nor like seeing the outsider, Ben still felt a new strain on his mind, different from either of the last two. It felt like something was trying to forcefully split his thoughts even after Head leveled his unnatural mind twice in one day, with it only barely failing to get there. It failing didn't keep him from getting a headache on top of all of his other aches and pains though, leaving Ben to try and get through his new task as he reached out with his connect while he started walking around the circle of people, looking into the minds of both the perpetrators of the disaster and the ghosts who had them chained to make sense of everything they were doing in order to try and find the perfect way to close the portal. As much as he didn't want to admit it, it looked like the gods had actually been right to leave that as his problem. The ritual they'd attempted was complex to a shocking degree. He could see in their memories just how long they'd practiced to make it work, and even then the fact that they'd pulled it off would have felt like a minor miracle if not for just how badly things had gone wrong in the end. Moving from person to person, he couldn't help but see where things would go wrong if they were taken out of the equation. From potentially destabilizing it in a way that would make it rip open even wider before it inevitably collapsed to overstabilizing it, making him question if it would ever be closed if things came to that. It wasn't going to be an easy problem to solve, made only worse by one very obvious thing he was doing his best to ignore. Naloth, the one who'd led all of those people and caused the disaster they were under, was nowhere to be seen. Had he run off after accomplishing everything he wanted to or simply escaped after things had gone wrong? Ben couldn't know. Even peering into the memories of those bound by enslaved souls, all of their focus had been directed to the portal the moment they were chained. The best possible result was that He'd been knocked into the infinite hells himself, forced to pay the price for his hubris, but Ben wasn't willing to place his faith in any sort of justice existing in the world. And that's something I can worry about later, he told himself. For now. His senses screamed at him before he had time to process them, and once more he moved beyond the limits of his body, ducking down just in time for something to only skim the top of his head instead of impaling him then and there as he turned to see what he was going to have to deal with from there. A part of him expecting more ghosts or possessed people around to try to stop him from closing the gate until he saw a familiar face as what Head felt to warn him made sense. The subtle sounds of movement, perhaps a slight hint on his peripheries that there was something wrong and a tingling on his skin. None of that was as significant as the strange sense that came with his sacrilege whispering in the back of his mind of nearby divinity. Its source, the demigod Aether, standing poised to attack with another spear in his hand. Aether, you absolute bitch! What the hell are you doing? Reclaiming my honor! He yelled, throwing another spear and making it scream through the air as Ben did his best to dodge. But not well enough. He felt the bite of the blade slice through the side of his arm as it sailed past, just adding to the injuries that filled his body. Honor my ass. Can't you see some slightly more pressing things going on right now? Ben yelled back as the demigod pulled another spear from what appeared to be a very well-made spatial bag, telling him there was likely plenty more in there to spare. Damn, and I'm really not in the best condition to be handling this right now. Ben had won fights before, but he always tried to make sure that things were heavily in his favor. When Head last fought Aether had planned for days, and when Head repeatedly beaten the man who'd come looking to duel him in Stonewall a while ago, Head known he was strong enough to handle it with relative ease. Not now, though. Ben hadn't brought any weapons. Head dropped the gun Head made to capture the soul of the outsider after using all of his bullets, and he hadn't brought anything else with him since he was supposed to be on vacation, and that wasn't even considering his current condition. The last time Head fought Aether, Ben's attributes had been significantly lower and he hadn't had a single awakened skill to his name at the time, but he also hadn't been so beaten down. Everything Head just done to survive left his body aching as he once more wished for a notification telling him Head finally gained the pain resistance of his dreams, and that wasn't even considering his thoughts. He was being pulled by the sight of the hells in a way it seemed the demigod wasn't, and he was still feeling the aftereffects of seeing both the outsider and the chaos. He hated the idea of having a fair fight, but given his state it wouldn't even be that. He was at a disadvantage. The only thing he felt he really had at the moment was his unnatural thought speed, going at its limit as he examined everything around him. He's staying back. Is that because he knows about my deep connection and is worried about the range, or is it because he's being cautious of me? I did gut him before, so that seems fairly possible, but I wouldn't doubt it if his daddy gave him a heads up about my skills at all, seeing as how I haven't kept them particularly secret from the gods since I've been trying to use them to help. Absolutely regretting being so damn useful all the time. Definitely gonna have to up my prices. And besides that, wait, what? I made that spear. Who's been giving this fucker my work? Seeing the hallmarks of his own craftsmanship and enchanting on a weapon that was now being pointed at him very quickly made Ben resolve himself to find and murder the person who provided it to the demigod, but did his best to hold back his anger as he instead focused on the subtle movements of the one before him, watching in slow motion to see both when the spear would be released and where it would end up, dodging out of the way by the skin of his teeth and only realizing a deeper problem the second he heard it hit something behind him. As Aether reached to pull out another, Ben immediately jumped back, not to avoid an incoming strike but instead to see what the demigod had hit without making it obvious, with him just able to tell that the spear had sailed clean through one of the arms of a mage that was maintaining the ritual. It wasn't severed, that was a small mercy, but things could have just gone very badly. Ben already knew that killing that one in particular would destabilize the portal in a big way, and he didn't currently put it past Aether to start attacking them if Ben showed any hint of concern, so instead he didn't. He smirked at the demigod, taunting him as he did. So that's all the son of a god of spears and war can pull off, huh? He laughed. The blood must run pretty thin, doesn't it? Oh, who am I kidding? I've met an Eth. Calling him a god is honestly an insult to the rest of them up there. Filthy brick worshipper. Eneth screamed, Ben's small taunts getting under his skin in a way he hadn't expected and affecting the aim of the next spear, with Ben needing a lot less effort to dodge it than the last. Brick? Excuse you, I get why you'd be jealous given your daddy's a lizard bitch, but that's no reason to badmouth his betters. My buddy is the ideal form of a cube through and through. Not that you'd understand anything about ideals. Before I started robbing your church blind, it was honestly the tackiest thing I've ever seen. Seriously, you guys owe me one for helping you get rid of that stuff. I really classed up the joint. The statement was met with more screaming as Ben carefully led Aether around, ensuring that no more of his attacks could hit the ritualists while at the same time being close enough for Ben to look into their minds, examining each of their parts in the spell to try and figure out how to disarm it as more ghosts only ever broke free. Between that and watching the demigod to keep dodging his far too powerful attacks, all while dealing with the mental after-effects of what Head witnessed over the course of that insane day, that left him only a bit of wiggle room to figure out how he wanted to approach the situation the second he got the portal under control, with there only being one real question to it. Should he murder Aether? Although I don't think this would count as murder, this is 100% self-defense. I mean, sure, maybe it would look like murder if anyone could tell just how badly I want to do it, but I really should measure the pros and cons before I give in. Con 1, he represents a powerful fighting force. But I think I can safely ignore that since here I am, absolutely not a fighter managing to survive against him even when he has awakened skills. Sorry, Aether, taking that point away. You should have trained more. Nobody was there to point out to Ben that normal people wouldn't be able to think or react in a way remotely close to how he could, making that point against Aether a bit less than relevant, so he went on in his judgment. Con numero 2. The gods might not like it. I can also safely ignore this point since I don't particularly care what they do and don't like. If Eneth's mad, then he should have raised his son better, and if the other gods don't like it, then they should have made sure none of my equipment ended up in this asshole's hands. Equipment he's just throwing away. This tool 100% just tossed a lower ultra-rare spear into the infinite hells. God, I hate him so much. This narrative has been unlawfully taken from Royal Road. If you see it on Amazon, please report it. Okay, I think that's it for cons, now on to pros. I don't like him, I want him dead, and if killing him isn't enough to get me to the third tier of sacrilege, then I don't know what will be. Okay, that settles that. Sorry, Aether, but the votes are in and you have to die. That just became a question of how, but as he thought on the method of execution he would be forcing on the demigod, Aether screamed out again. Just die already, you bastard. It feels a little weird for you to be calling me a bastard when you were 100% conceived in a three-way. Ben shot back, not giving anything the man said much thought before saying whatever the rudest thing to come to his minds ended up being. And it seemed like it was working too. Aether only grew more and more enraged as Ben finally made it around the circle of mages and explored all of their minds, giving him both the solution as well as a new problem. I need to kill two that are on opposite sides of the ring at the same time if I don't want things to risk going horrifically wrong. All while I'm trying to not get killed by the idiot currently aiming for my life before I kill him in return. What the actual hell did I do to deserve this? With Myriad keeping an eye on Thera, there was nobody to give him any smart replies to that rhetorical question, while Aether's mood changed in that same instant. The demigod stopped and seemed to take a breath, calming down as he did before giving back his own cocky smile. You're stalling. Give in to the inevitable and meet your end. They'll be sending your whore to you before you know it. And now he's getting something worse than death. Okay, just gotta get the timing right. You know, Aether? It's funny. Ben told him as he kept backing up. Even his pain started to touch his voice. I've spared you 3 times now, and not once have you shown any gratitude. Really just goes to show that neither of your dads raised you to have any manners, so after I kill you, I'm gonna have to take it out on them. Felth will be the easier one. I've already financially ruined the guy. But let's be real, you don't really care about him, do you? Eneth's going to be the big one. It'll be causing some issues. And you've done half the work for me. Just think, the moment the world knows that a demigod not only tried to murder someone, but was so weak they failed, it's going to look bad on him from all angles. He couldn't raise his son well into being a decent person, plus that son was somehow so weak that Head repeatedly lost to someone who isn't even a fighter, instead having to rely on sneak attacks that he kept failing. In the end, nobody's even going to miss you because you don't even sound like you'd be useful in the next wave at this point. Isn't that just so funny? Keep talking. Aether snarled as he threw another spear, watching as it sliced through part of Ben's arm as the craftsman struggled to dodge more and more. Head learned enough about Ben and his desire for revenge to know he just needed to stay out of his range to ensure his mind couldn't be read. But he wanted to be close enough to see the despair at his defeat on his face, leading him to take a step forward for every step back Ben made. It was obvious he wasn't fast enough to escape. All he could do was wear himself down, and Aether was more than patient to watch as it happened. There was always the issue of what he'd do if any gods tried to stop him, but he wasn't too worried about that. He was a demigod in the middle of a war. His worth outstripped the small apostle by so much that the idea they'd inflict any real punishment on him felt absurd. If it was anything too bad, all he'd need to do was ensure he raised his name and fame enough in the coming battles that nobody could hold his actions against him. "You know, Aether," Ben said, sounding like he was beginning to truly suffer in a way that was music to the demigod's ears. "I think I'll keep one little fact about you to myself, as a little treat I can savor while you're dead." "So fear's driven you delusional," he laughed while Ben went on. "You're not curious? Oh well, I'm gonna tell you anyway. It's about how dumb you really are." With those words, Ben sprung his counterattack. He still wasn't sure to what extent Aether was aware of his abilities, but there were 3 areas that he didn't seem on guard against during their entire fight so far. One was Ben's deep connection. Sure, he seemed to be avoiding getting too close to Ben himself, but there were far more people in the room than just the 2 of them, and deep connection let him do far more than just read minds. With every person that entered his range, Ben had stolen as much of their mana as he safely could without collapsing the ritual, slowly overfilling his soul. That led to the second. He'd seen no signs that Aether was on guard against his magic. It was more than possible he was aware he had some, but if he had any clue about the level of skill he'd reached with it, then there was no way he wouldn't have been on guard, nor would he have been willing to stand so close to him. Finally, there was the disaster next to them that the demigod seemed practically blind to, the portal to the infinite hells, with Ben having guided him to one of the gaps in the ritualists that was being filled by something intangible. A ghost. All at once Hellori was in his head, having gone to check on him after realizing the other gods were too focused on trying to track swarms of ghosts, evaluating the devastation, or focusing on the various people affected by what had happened, all of them content to trust that he would say something if there was a problem and leaving her alone to discover what was happening. Aether was trying to murder Ben. A large part of her was wondering if no one else up there had really seen it, or if any that viewed Ben less favorably had just decided to ignore it. But she knew she needed to at least try and stop things before they got too far, only she was moments too late. Ben ran the massive amount of mana he'd accumulated through the ground, making the earth jut out beside Aether, throwing him towards the infinite hells as he tried to react, but again not fast enough. At the same time Ben attacked, He'd used that same magic to move the earth beneath him and launch himself forward, bringing the demigod into the range of his connection before exposing every mind in his head and screaming with them. The effect didn't kill him outright, no matter how awful he was. Being a demigod did come with a certain level of strength, but it most certainly hurt him, breaking his mind and leaving him no way to react or protect himself as he continued to fall, passing through the boundary where every ghost was escaping and landing himself into the infinite hells, letting Ben collapse to the ground and catch his breath. "Oh, hey Hellori, didn't notice you got here. Please tell me you witnessed enough of that to see what was happening." "Hey, it worked out. One less problem for me in the world, plus wait. Something had just gone very horrifically wrong, at least as far as Ben was concerned, as he noticed something missing. A notification, specifically one telling him he finally reached the 3rd tier of his sacrilege as he rushed to process why. "Oh my God, I didn't actually kill him, did I? I tossed him into hell, but I didn't deliver some finishing blow, so my soul isn't being marked with the blood of a demigod. Damn it." While that may have been a result of his own poor planning, he resolved to place the full blame on Aether as he cursed the demigod for not being remotely useful even in his final moments in that plane of reality. Hellori hesitantly asked. She could tell his mind had changed again, and by a significant extent too, but even with the absolute jumbled mess going on in his head, she could still make out a barrage of swearing taking place in over 3/4 of his available thoughts, even if he was trying to keep it from touching his face. "Oh, just unhappy about how things turned out. Someone trying to murder me again, and with my own weapons to boot, all while I was busy trying to close this stupid portal. Which I figured out how to do, by the way, so now that I'm not in any active danger, I should really get started." He resolved himself to stand up, doing his best to ignore his wounds for the time being as he accepted just what he'd have to do to get the gate well enclosed. He was going to have to kill 2 people. He wasn't even concerned about the act itself, Ben had just been more than willing to murder Aether, but he did have a bit of personal concern about how little he felt at having that as his only option. He didn't care about these people, and they'd actively put the world in major peril, even if they had the best of intentions. Myriad had once said that Ben didn't place any particular value on life, and while he still wanted to deny it a bit, at times like that it really shone through. He felt a little bad because he thought he should have some resistance to it, not for the act he was about to do as he materialized 2 new guns for himself, enchanting on the bullets he would fire so that not only would the ritualists die, but the ghosts possessing them would forcefully pass on instead of maintaining their position the way he was already seeing in some parts of the ritual. With all of that prepared, he stood beside the closer of the 2 and took aim at the farther before pulling 2 triggers in the same instant, leaving his 2 victims to collapse to the ground, the gate to hell closing with that act as well. I really have gotten too used to this world. It was an idle thought that felt like it wanted to lodge into his head just as deeply as the sights had already witnessed that day. But unlike some of the other things going on in his minds, he was able to shove it away as new notifications rang out in his mind. Yep, I saved, I survived, and I was forced to waste that entire quest reward on a job I was getting passive experience to. If I hadn't been forced on vacation, I might have even been able to finish it and have a brand new job by the time this happened. Oh well, I guess no use crying over spilled milk. Unlike usual though, he didn't immediately go for a new job, instead looking around him first. None of the other ritualists were freed from their possession. It looked like the ghosts that bound them had been instructed to carry out the ritual, but now that it was no longer possible, all of them stood fruitlessly in place as they kept up their attempt at something that would no longer function, trapping them all until the gods got someone to deal with them. Seeing no urgent dangers there, he then turned his attention to himself, counting his injuries. He was still wearing the Church of Myriad, but it would need to be repaired after stray spears had sliced through it into his arms, which he decided to attribute to his excellent craftsmanship when making them instead of Aether's strength, as part of his mind began to think that the church could use an upgrade while another part was more concerned about his wounds as he stripped off the jacket, wet with his blood, to see the damage. If he was on Earth, he'd have needed to get stitches, and without Thera nearby to heal him he still needed some as well. So he quickly refilled his mana by stealing from some of the bound ritualists before materializing a needle and thread and getting to work the best he could, ignoring the sting each time the pin pierced his skin as he did his best to close his wounds until he could get back to his favorite healer. It was only once that was done that he looked at his card to view the less obvious damage, feeling himself frown as he did. Those spears had been enchanted to be used in the war, the enchantments upon each of them aimed at lowering vitality as much as possible, with Ben getting to experience firsthand how well they'd worked. Even with his vitality at over 1300 along with his natural resistances, his resistance enhancement, his absorption resistance and all his other defensive skills, he was still down to almost half of what he should have been after only a few slices. One good stab would have ended him. Which means on top of the wounds I also need to get my vitality topped up. But that's officially a later problem, so without further ado, he touched the job crystal hanging from his neck, letting the available options fill his mind. Available jobs: Trap User, Craftsman Alchemy Path, Craftsman Artistic Path, Craftsman Blacksmith Path, Craftsman Cooking Path, Craftsman Stonecrafts Path, Craftsman Sewing Path, Holy Craftsman, a Mathematician, Cursed Item Maker, a High Tank, Destructive Craftsman, a Soul-Defiling Gardener, a Summoned Enchanter, Ritual Enchanter, Divine Enchanter, a High Marksman, a High Destruction Mage, World Killer, Beginner Puppeteer, Freak Mind User, a Unholy Thinker, Connect Master, Polymath, Holy Adversary, Title Master, Alien Mind, a Multiversal Material Mage, Outsider, Body User, Actualizer, Slayer, a Judge. For new ones this time, with 3 of them being strange by all accounts. Body User was at least a known one, gained when a person acquired enough body-related skills, and it looked like Ben had finally passed the threshold when taking Master of All had gained him blood regeneration. Actualizer caught his eye too. He needed no explanation for what it was for. He just hadn't expected that particular skill to get its own specialized job to go with it. It wasn't one he could see himself taking either. As entertaining as the skill was as a way to fill his stomach when he was talking with Myriad without actually gorging himself, he was happy to treat the ability as more of a fun hobby than anything else. A neat little benefit of the system and his own growth to be enjoyed, but not immediately useful, even if he was curious as to what attributes such a job would help him raise. Maybe I'll take it when I'm at the 9th level just to satisfy my curiosity a bit. The author's content has been appropriated. Report any instances of this story on Amazon. He was having an easy time raising it, so he didn't doubt He'd get there, and if it was going to be anything like when He'd taken Apprentice Mage when he was already a 9th level enchanter, then He'd be able to finish it in a couple hours at most. Perhaps a waste of time, but it would scratch his curiosity. Something he doubted He'd be able to conveniently do with the next 2 jobs. For Slayer at least, he believed he understood why he got it. While it could have been a result of helping to kill the outsider, he suspected it had more to do with his titles. He now had both Outsider Slayer and Godslayer recorded within his status. Given that when He'd gained his 2nd enemy title, Holy Adversary showed up as an option for him, he was willing to bet that having a pair of them was enough for the system to take notice and create a new option. Of course, there was the issue that he had no clue what sorts of skill or attribute bonuses it would give, nor how hard something like that would be to level. It wasn't one he ever saw himself taking, even if it did leave him with a curious itch while looking at it. That only left the last one. While he at least had a guess for what He'd done to acquire Slayer, Judge felt like it had come from nowhere. Without knowing what he could have possibly done to gain it, he didn't give it more than a second's thought before taking the option he knew he actually wanted. He'll go for Ritual Enchanter. Name: Ben Hef. Race: human. Titles: Apostle of Myriad, the Forgotten One, Miracle Maker, Skill Learner, Enemy of Aneth, Trial Defier, Trial Breaker, Godslayer, Monster, Madman, God Killer, Threat, the Mad Apostle, Destined Holder of Connect, God of Destruction, Creator of Life, Awakener, Maniac, Brutal Blacksmith, Defier of Gods, Title Holder, Enemy of Valencia, Great Teacher, Student of Hellori, Myriad's Monster, Outsider Slayer. Jobs: Ritual Enchanter, LV0. Previous jobs: Apprentice Craftsman, Craftsman, Priest, Enchanter, Mind User, Magic Item Maker, Magic Weapon Maker, High Enchanter, Fractured Mind User, Tree Tamer, High Craftsman, Apprentice Mage, True Mage, Tank, Heretic, Adventurer, Divine Heretic, Kin, Master Craftsman, Master Enchanter, Scholar, Connected Enchanter, Infernal Craftsman, Marksman, Destruction Mage, Material Mage, High Material Mage, Profane Enchanter, Master Material Mage, Impious Creator, Mind Master, Master Adventurer, Otherworldly Craftsman, Material Creator, Master of All. Attributes: A Vitality, 1303. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 35 per hour. Mana, 1519. Mana Recovery Rate, 110 per minute. Strength, 1053. Agility, 303. Stamina, 2508. Intelligence, 8724. Affinities: Light 3. Life 2. Fire, 4. Water 3. Air, 4. Earth 2. Death 3. Dark 1. Space, 4. Time 5. Resistances: Light, 68. Life, 72. Fire, 75. Water, 69. Air, 66. Earth, 81. Death, 78. Dark, 85. Space, 63. Time, 61. Blessed Skills: Unending Crafting LV5 *. Divine Enchanting LV5 *. Unnatural Mind LV7 *. Passive Skills: King of Sacrilege LV9 *. A Bind. Integrated Demonic Body LV6. Defense Enhancement LV9. Absorption Resistance LV9. Knowledge LV7 *. All Affinity Resistance Enhancement LV7. Lesser Inspiration LV9. Fine Motor Control LV9. Bite Enhancement LV1. Piercing Resistance LV5. Artisan's Touch. Intelligence Enhancement LV9. Alien Thought Structure. Blood Regeneration LV1. Active Skills. Stealth LV1. Deep Connection LV5*. Cycling LV1. Marksmanship LV7. Material Manipulation LV6*. Swimming LV1. Dance LV0. Unnatural Thought Speed LV6*. A Mental Symbiosis LV9. Puppetry LV9. Rule Bender LV1. MLV1. Actualization LV6. Blessings. A Myriad's Blessing. Anilia's Blessing. Hiloris Blessing. Galwax's Blessing. Elvit's Mana Regeneration Blessing. Ineth's Blessing. Earth Pantheon's Blessing. Life Pantheon's Blessing. Dark Pantheon's Blessing. Olentia's Blessing. Neri's Blessing. Usus Mana Regeneration Blessing. Witness of Chaos. Trials. Trial of Analia and Talona. Trial of the Dead God. Earth Tower. Life Tower. Dark Tower. It was something he thought wouldn't actually take him too long thanks to his high level of enchanting, along with how complex his enchanting technique had become by that point. And with that done, he properly scanned his card for all of the changes beyond just checking his vitality, and felt himself grimace when he saw something that had slipped his mind sitting near the bottom. Within his blessings was listed something new. Something that wasn't presented in the same way as a normal blessing, not having come from a god or a group of gods, but instead a place. Ben had stared into the chaos, witnessed it in a way no mortal should, and in those seconds began to adapt to it, with that change being reflected within his status, leaving whatever effects it had as a mystery to him for the time being. "Hey Hellori," Ben started to ask before thinking better of it, choosing to save the topic for Myriad later as he seamlessly switched to something else. "I'm done here, so I'm heading back. I think it's pretty safe to say that my vacation is officially over." He was as refreshed as he was ever going to be, and he could already imagine a mountain of work that was going to come from that all, but he didn't care. With that done, he just wanted to start heading home. The walk back felt long compared to his mad rush there, all the more so for the new wounds he carried with him as he forced his body on while he slowly made his way back to the group looking after Thera, finding them to be in the same place he left them. "Is it done?" the leader of the lot asked Ben as he arrived. "Is it over?" "As over as it's going to be," he shrugged, trying to ignore the pain the small act caused in him. "We're going to be having a ghost problem for a while, but not much we can do about that. And it will only get worse with time. Even without anything controlling them, as hints of sanity and understanding came back to the disembodied souls, they would once more gain control over some of the powers they held in life. Sure, there would be those who would simply pass on once free from the hells, and there were going to be plenty who didn't have a skill set that would translate well to their new astral forms, but there were sure to be great mages among them who would be able to cause unheard-of levels of devastation. But that's officially not my problem. The world is saved, and the gods can ask the light and death spirits to help handle everything that escaped. For the time being, I have other things to worry about," Myriad said in his head, sounding so very tired. "This entire day has been quite the adventure, but hold that thought for 1 second. Thera was still unconscious, but he was going to try and speed up her recovery just a little if he could as he connected to both her and the group around them, transferring over the mana within his own soul as he stole it from the surrounding people and kept passing it over in the hopes of waking her up, keeping the process going as he did his best to estimate everyone's regeneration rates to keep any of them from being knocked out by the process. In the end, it had to be nothing but a drop in the bucket when compared to what her soul could hold and the speed it would regenerate by itself, with no more than 10,000 points of it being passed over to her. But after 20 minutes it seemed to have some effect as she began to stir and eventually opened her eyes. "Everything hurts." She was the first thing she groaned out, letting a small smile slip onto Ben's face given how big of an understatement that felt like in the face of all they'd dealt with. They'd walked away with worse injuries from lesser threats in the past. As unpleasant as it was, he'd happily take the current pain as he joked with her. "If you come across this story on Amazon, it's taken without permission from the author. Report it. It looks like you really are capable of getting mana exhausted. How's it feel to be as mortal as the rest of us?" "Terrible, I hate this." "Ha, well you should be back to roughly around 100,000 by this point, so focus on healing yourself up. and then maybe if you're feeling up to it you could help your sweet little boyfriend pretty please? Saying that forced her to actually focus on him instead of just her own soreness and see the state he was in, her eyes going wide as she took in not only the range of cuts head closed himself, leaving ugly stitches across his flesh, but also seeing all of the deeper strain head put his body through thanks to her mana examination as she started to reach out to him, only stopping when he tapped her head. You. First, he told her firmly. I accidentally exposed way too much of my mind to you before. If I manage to accidentally damage your brain, then it needs to be fixed. I will live until you're done. Fine. Then catch me up on what happened while I was out. Did we do it? The outsider's dead and I closed the gate to hell. He confirmed while avoiding giving any more detail when people he didn't know surrounded them still. No matter how justified he was in killing one of the world's few demigods, that wasn't exactly an accomplishment he wanted to spread, and she seemed to pick up on that, not pressing for more at the time, even as she wondered where so many of his new wounds had come from. You don't even have a head. But fine, go on, I have stuff to do too anyway. What he didn't say was just what that stuff was as he laid back and closed his eyes, sending up a small prayer to Myriad as he didn't try to go to his god's realm, but instead followed the path it made as it went to the cube, finding himself standing among a meeting of the gods that none there would have wanted him in as the divine around him began to take notice as comments and cries went up among them. He didn't particularly care though. Seeing if he could pull off a move like that had been a test of the limits of his sacrilege, but since he had succeeded, he had something to get off his chest as he yelled out at all of them. If I ever find out that my weapons are ending up in the hands of the Church of Aneth, Olencia, or anyone else who has tried to kill me again, I am done. Do you all understand? Because of this bullshit, if you want me to keep making shit for the war efforts, my prices have officially tripled. He didn't wait to see what any of them would say, he didn't care. Having got that out of his system, he went back down to fume and plan on how to survive in a world where so many seemed like they'd be more than happy to see him dead. After his outburst at the gods, which had at least helped with some of his building stress, Ben and Thera spent another hour with the group around them, healing their wounds and slowly siphoning off their mana to top up Thera even a little faster so they could do one of the last things they'd need to before finally going home to get some rest. Only when he was confident they weren't about to exhaust Thera a second time did the two fly off, asking the group to wait for their return since there was a space mage among them who could help speed up their return trip as they both rushed to the area they'd only just left, off in search of the remains of the outsider. Ben knew it had collapsed into itself to some extent when he'd been dealing with the both of them being sucked in by the implosion it had caused, but he hadn't been in a position where he could really think about the damage. Now though he needed to see it, not just to understand the scale of it all but to also find something else that had to have been in the area. When they got close enough, Ben once more covered Thera's eyes, letting himself focus on guiding her in case whatever was left behind would still have any negative effect on her mind as he surveyed the devastation around them. For miles in all directions, the land was destroyed and barren, with whatever had been there at the time left as a mystery to all who'd see it in the future. But the farther in they went, the more aware he became of something else missing. The outsider's corpse. I swear to God, if this thing came back to life, I'm gonna go insane. That is a level of bullshit I'm not ready to handle after a day like today. As a minor mercy to him, though, it seemed that wasn't the case. As they went on, it became easier to see a minor mountain of rubble piled up in the distance, with the occasional unnatural shimmer shining through, telling him the outsider's body had condensed far more than had expected as they finally landed. Ben led Thera forward so he could get a closer look while he felt the foreign substance pick at his brain in a similar, though lesser, way that the outsider itself had, telling him all he needed to know about the dangers it still held. As it shimmered and warped around itself under its own power while its foreign state clashed against reality itself, it ever so gently shook loose the dirt that was encasing it, slowly dropping away all that it was buried under and speaking of a day when more would be revealed. Clearly a situation that would need to be dealt with, but not the first one. For that, Ben pulled out something that had made much earlier. A compass, bound and pointing in the direction of the only soul crystal head made that had actually managed to seal away anything. Given how everything else was sucked in after the monster's death, Ben got Thera to start pulling away piles of dirt, keeping an eye on the compass to see if it would move to where it was deposited to, but having no luck in that regard either, leaving the only place left to check being the now fully exposed corpse. Of course, none would be able to tell it was a corpse just by looking at it. Not even Ben would have realized if he hadn't been one of the ones responsible for making it. Aside from the way it interacted with the world around it, there was nothing left of its original form, with it all instead compressed down to a giant lump 10 meters across. And the soul crystal is buried in all of that. I guess I could just leave it, but He'd never get his hands on the soul of an outsider again. He didn't even know what he would or could do with such a thing, but it was better than leaving it to rot and better to have it somewhere he could keep an eye on it, if only to be sure that the monster it sealed wouldn't somehow break free from the enchantments that bound it and rise to the godhood it was destined for. Which means I need to see if I can pull off some digging, since I doubt Thera's earth magic is going to be super applicable to working on foreign matter, since it doesn't even extend to manipulating something like wood. Which reminds me, even if I can't do it myself, I really should sponsor some deeper research on the topic of the extent that each affinity really covers beyond anything I've seen in the library records. Which doesn't even remotely matter right now. Gotta just hope my super broad, super wonderful magic will extend to this weird crap. He didn't really doubt it would, given the other things had done with it, but after walking around the strange mass to try and gauge the approximate location of the soul crystal, he was left to test it, expending his own power to dig through the substance before him and feeling just how much mana it took when compared against manipulating more regular substances. But after far more work than had been expecting, he finally found it and used his magic to pull out the soul crystal. Watching the substance close up around the whole head dug again, the moment mana stopped being run through it. Jackpot! He felt a smile stretch across his face as he slipped it into his pocket and was about to turn his attention to guiding Thera into sealing away the alien matter in a way it wouldn't escape, only to stop himself again. Much in the same way he'd never get another chance to get his hands on an outsider's soul. When would he again have an opportunity to get his hands on foreign matter that was somehow stable in a reality that seemed to want to reject its very nature? Sure, there'd be some danger in getting it, but it was a temptation that was far too great to resist, even if he had no clue what he'd do with it. So once again, exerting some of his power, he compressed and shaped some of the stone around him into a strong container before using what he had left to rip away a fist's worth of the strange material, feeling himself nearly bottom out on his mana as he did. That didn't matter to him, though. He now had something new and fun to try and play with a bit, and with nothing else to do, he helped guide Thera in her power, getting her to create something far sturdier than loose dirt to hold what remained of the thing they killed, lest they learn what long-term effects its corpse might have on the world around them. So? Myriad asked back. Don't play coy with me, man. You gave me a quest that you made up on the spot. What the hell gives? Getting quests is like the main perk of having a connection to a god. One I very politely haven't been bothering you about since I've used up all of your pre-approved list without getting any more options. At least ID thought, except here we are, with me only discovering at the end of the freaking world that you've been holding out on me. You can make up quests on the spot now. God, the betrayal hurts so much. Am I the only one in the faith who hasn't been getting the advantages of this? Cuts me deep, man. Myriad sighed. I'll admit, I should have brought it up, I just knew you were going to react poorly. And for what it's worth, I haven't offered anyone else anything beyond the standard achievement one since I've gained the strength to do this. Okay, fine, so what give then? Afraid I'd finish too many too fast and leave you in poverty again? Not exactly, though now that you mentioned it, that's a very good reason to avoid giving you more if I can avoid it. But no, the reason I haven't been offering quests is because I can't, and it really is largely your fault. Explain. Again his god sighed. I have only just gained the ability to give quests more freely, but still not nearly as freely as other gods with more power. Someone like Analia can grant quests she believes will challenge her believers, but as of right now, I'm different. I can only give quests I don't believe can be succeeded by the ones I give them to. Super cool to know you didn't think I'd succeed with stopping the outsider. It was a very reasonable assumption, and for that matter you should be flattered. Ben, to be clear, I currently can't give you quests because in general I believe in you far too much. This current success has only reinforced that feeling. Explain to me a bit more? Ben, I've known you for years now. I've seen you challenged many times, and each time I've seen you come out on top. I've seen you change the world with your creations, improve and save the lives around you, discover secrets of the universe and escape an impossible trial. And now, on top of all of that, I've seen you save the world. I simply have too much faith in you to possibly have quest options spring up left and right, and everything you achieve only makes it harder. Okay, if you were trying to flatter me, then it worked, Ben told him, even if the answer filled him with complicated emotions. It did feel good to hear Myriad thought so highly of him, but the fact that it was keeping him from reaping some of the rewards he could otherwise get couldn't help but leave a poor taste in his mouth. Still, it seemed there was nothing he could do about it, so he instead did his best to accept it as he tried to move on. In that case, we should have a talk later to try and figure out some appropriate quests for Sakel, Valeria, and some of the other members of your faith. There's no reason they shouldn't get the option to claim a few benefits no matter how impossible they seem. But moving on, now that we have that out of the way, it's okay to say it. The narrative has been taken without authorization. If you see it on Amazon, report the incident. I'm not going to say it, Myriad groaned, knowing exactly what Ben was alluding to. Come on, do it, you know you want to. Given what happened, your anger was justified. The fact that weapons you've made were turned against you is outrageous considering all you've done, especially after you just helped save the world. It's just. Fine, did you have to follow me to cause a scene? His god lamented. You know him on your side about this, but there were definitely better ways it could have been handled. Yelling at everyone did wonders for my mental health. After everything that's happened to me today, I deserved it. On that note, what's the word? Are they going to meet my newest price, or am I free to focus on my own devices? Given that money's going to be pretty meaningless if we lose, they all agreed without much of a fight. For the most part, there's more than a few who don't like letting you have your way so easily. Well, as we say in Myriad Church, they can go do it themselves. We absolutely don't like saying that in my church. So what are you going to do now then? Well, I did swear I was going to take them for all they were worth for dealing with this disaster, but there's nothing I actually immediately need, he said, thinking to himself as he did. Ben deserved a reward for his work. He was never going to be willing to back down on that, but nothing immediately came to mind for what he wanted to take from the gods. Blessings were always nice, but he was sure they'd fight tooth and nail against giving him anything nearly worthy of the success he had. But what else was there? Maybe he could get them to help him complete a couple jobs, but that was just a worse version of whatever blessings he could potentially get. Even if demanding more money for his mistreatment was his go-to, there wasn't actually anything he could do with his already insane quantity of it, and while there were a couple skills he was interested in getting, they again didn't seem to be equivalent to having saved the world as they knew it. Well, put a pin on claiming my payment for now, he ultimately decided. Something will come up eventually. Maybe if I ever find I'm really struggling with a level or two, I'll force them to help out then. Okay, and as worrying as it is that you've got a debt to hold over the heads of all the gods in the world right now, that wasn't what I was talking about. There's a lot of worry up here about just what you'll be doing to the Church of Ather after this. I'll tell you as long as you don't pass it on. If anyone else asks, then just pretend you don't know. Fine, but I can only promise that if you aren't going to commit mass murder against Ather's priests or believers, so if that's the case, then don't tell me. Jesus, Myriad, what do you think of me? I think you're someone who isn't afraid of showing a strong reaction anytime someone tries to murder you, and this has come from a repeat offender. I have no clue how far you're going to want to take it. Okay, fair. But while I don't like the Church of Ather, I'm not going to consider everyone who gives him faith to be equally guilty. Let alone his normal believers. I'm not even going to do something as insane as exterminate his priests. Fine, so what are you going to do then? That, Ben smiled. Nothing. I don't believe you. For now at least, Ben clarified. Think about it, Myriad, they just lost their demigod, someone who had to give them some power on the international stage by virtue of his basic existence. And he died while trying to kill me. All the other assholes up here aren't going to try and keep that a secret, are they? There was some talk of it, but in the end, no. Aether had a poor enough reputation to begin with, and enough gods value justice that they won't stand for pretending he died while helping to save the world when he was really just getting in the way of the one who'd actually handled that task. This is on a far bigger scale than what happened with Olentia's oracle. Okay, good to know there's at least a few with some principles up there. Which reminds me, I saved the world. Why did I get Outsider Slayer and Demigod Slayer as titles and not something like Hero or Savior or World Saver or anything useful? Not sure, and get back to the main topic. Fine. The point is, even if most don't know who I am, plenty in that church are going to after everything I've done to them. So while they're not only dealing with having their power weakened across the world stage at the same time as they're dealing with their current bad press and their unfortunate lack of funds, they're going to be justifiably panicked about how I'm going to react about their demigod trying to off me. I want them feeling that very panic for as long as possible. Getting my revenge can wait after they've stewed a bit. Fine, but then what? Not super sure, he shrugged as ideas flew across his mind. Maybe I'll disassemble and destroy their churches across the land, brick by brick. Maybe I'll treat myself and murder Felth since he really has it coming anyway, and it would cost Aneth his apostle. Maybe I'll convert as many of his believers away from him as possible and let him deal with losing even more faith. Or maybe I'll have to start really experimenting with the limits of King of Sacrilege. Or maybe I'll do all of the above. While Ben was willing to say that most of Aneth's believers were innocent of their god's acts, he wasn't willing to extend that same belief to the god in question. In the brief window He'd been connected to Aether before He'd taken his plunge, Ben had seen the brief conversation He'd had with his father. He had no doubt the god would deny it, but when Aneth had told him to act in a way becoming of the son of a war god, Aether's mind had immediately flashed to murdering Ben. Gods would read minds without even trying. There was no way he didn't know what was going to be attempted. Well, I guess that means I have a few months of peace before you cause some insane levels of interfaith havoc, Myriad sighed, already envisioning a future where He'd have to defend Ben's actions and at least having the recent events to fall back on to help justify it. It will be great, don't worry. For now, though, we have something else to talk about that you're maybe going to want on the down low. I'm not actually sure. Oh, empty skies, what now? I got a new blessing. Oh? Myriad said, his curiosity piqued. We all know what you did. It wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if someone decided to reward your work. Who am I kidding? You wouldn't worry about if it needed to be kept secret if it was as simple as that. Let me guess, somehow you got a blessing from the outsider, didn't you? No, and I'm not even sure if it's really technically a blessing, Ben explained. It's something I got when the outsider ripped a hole in reality and I was left staring through it. Witness of chaos. It may be in the blessing section of my status, but even when I got it, the system just said ID acquired it and didn't say anything about it being a blessing like any of the rest I've gained. Ever heard of anything like that happening before? Never, Myriad said, collapsing to the ground below. But then, no mortal has ever had the chance to stare into the chaos. Honestly, Ben, you somehow keep managing to go through the most bizarre shit in the universe. Ha, hey man, I'm a summoned soul from an alien reality. Every day here is some of the most bizarre shit in the universe to me. Fair enough, I suppose. So how are you feeling? Any side effects? Yes. Even as they spoke, Ben could feel the things scratching at his head. The depths of the infinite hells and the shifting form and physics of the outsider, and more than anything else, the chaos itself, all of it tainting his mind and leaving Myriad to sigh when he said as much. All things considered, you seem fine enough, so I'm not immediately worried. But even if I was, I don't think there's anything we could even do. All we can do is hope it fades and gets better with time. Joy, oh joy. The sarcasm was thick in his voice. But there really was nothing left to do but hope for the best, with Myriad at least trying to end on a positive note. At least that's one emergency done with. Not exactly. Naloth escape. Even if things went wrong, I'm pretty sure he walked away with a buttload of power. Then that's an emergency for a later day. For now, just try and relax the best you can. You've earned it. Out in the world, Yota ran, feeling an alien heart pumping in his chest with each step, and he hated every second of it. He hated the running, with that same event being clear in his mind before He'd been trapped in the hells where his thoughts had been distorted for untold centuries or millennia. He couldn't say. More than that, though, he hated the new situation he found himself in. He'd entered the body of Naloth to get a proper grasp of the situation He'd found himself in after being freed to a new world and despite his natural wishes. He did his best to keep the body he was in alive through his properties as a death god. It helped that the mortal He'd chosen seemed to have an unnatural life force, obviously thanks to the bizarre ritual He'd carried out, which had given him the time He'd needed to be sure that his incompatible nature wouldn't lead to the man's early death so he could get the information he needed, finding a world worse off than he ever could have guessed. At first, it had thrilled him. A world at war against an impossible enemy. What could be better for a death god to enjoy? But the more he learned, The more he realized it wasn't going to be some paradise planet for him to grow his strength on before venturing out into the vaster universe to find what had happened to his old homeworld and reclaim it for himself, after bringing an army of ghosts along for his conquest. No, the invaders didn't seem to only kill and conquer the local population, but whatever gods they had too. That was enough to tell him that he needed to leave the world in search of something better, to mimic a stray void god and harvest what fleeting souls he could. It wouldn't be too hard either. A cursory glance at his host's memories told him that even after being tossed into hell, Head likely held on to more of his faith and power than the numerous gods of that world, who had to spend their stashes to save their people, while at the same time splitting all that there was to go around amongst so many others. He wouldn't be able to take them all on, but so long as he could slip away with only a few noticing, he was sure he could silence them if he needed to and escape in the end, maybe even bringing some stray souls with him. But when Head tried, he was faced with the cruelest fate of all. He still wasn't free. In the ages that the body Head been trapped in had sat in the hells, it had decayed and rotted away, releasing him from the flesh that had bound him for so long after the ascended god of his home had placed that curse on him. When Head left the hells, Head thought that had been it too. He hadn't given it a second thought when he slipped into the new flesh before him, only to discover that he was still just as bound. By inhabiting a new body, Head become just as trapped in it as he had in his past, with no way to escape. While the death of his mortal body in a plan that held souls wasn't a problem, he couldn't simply kill the new one to escape. That would be a one-way ticket to his own demise. No, for better or for worse, he was stuck there for the time being, but that didn't mean he always would be. He knew from the memories he was digging through that the next attack was coming. Head happily watched from the sidelines and harvest the souls he could for power, the entire time working and planning on his escape to get the revenge he swore He'd claim. In Myriad's realm, books of all sorts were swarming around Ben, flying under the power of his actualization as he took them all in, reading the history and records of his god's race to pass the time while his mind's focused on different problems, with a solution finally snapping into place after months of thinking. Got it. The thought wasn't referring to his 9th level of actualization Head gained in the 2 months since the world had gone to hell, nor the 8th level of his knowledge to suddenly take shape though. No, instead it referred to a secret project of his, one Head been working on ever since Head encountered the gate to hell, with the enchantments Head need to construct finally taking shape in his mind. And I cannot stress enough how worrying it is that you won't tell me what it is you've been trying to make. Myriad sighed, still not knowing what mysterious project had swarmed his apostle's idle thoughts in all of that time. Nothing good ever comes from anything you feel the need to hide from me. Don't worry, you'll see later, Ben said, waving off his god's concerns. I'm going to need to build a large part of it in your church anyway, so I can't exactly keep it a secret forever. Oh, but no telling the other gods, including Nair and Helori. I trust them, but this is the sort of thing that's more useful the less people know about it. That's horrifying to hear coming from you of all people. What the hell is that supposed to mean? That I've never heard you care about keeping a secret from those two as well, and now I can't begin to imagine what you're trying to do. Again, it will be fine, so stop stressing. It's gonna age you horribly. Everything you do ages me. That can't be right. I'm such a sweet little guy. It's not good to take your problems out on the people you care about, buddy. And yet, with the next wave only 2 months away, somehow you're still a bigger point of stress to me than anything else. Ugh. Don't remind me. Ben groaned as he slumped to the ground, letting the various books around him fall with him. Just thinking about it has me feeling extra mortal. How do you think it's gonna go? This content has been unlawfully taken from Royal Road. Report any instances of this story if found elsewhere. Bad, but still likely better than initially projected, Myriad told him, sounding largely neutral in an attempt to not let the future get to either of them. We've significantly more awakened mages than initially expected. You're welcome for that. And the overall quality of weapons is higher than we'd been planning to have access to as well. Again, you're welcome. Plus, we didn't have to spend any faith during the first wave, and given how things turned out there, significantly less damage was caused to the world as a whole. MMH, I don't really want to take credit for that one, Ben grumbled. No matter the part Head played in it, Head spent lives to do it, and that fact still hung over him, no matter how unintentional it had been. Anyway, I hear a but coming. But I've seen firsthand how bad the second wave can be, Myriad sighed. Things aren't going to stay so well afterwards. Depending on how bad it ends up, we might not even be able to put together an organized front against the third wave, though that is a future we'll likely be able to avoid, just a worst-case scenario. It's all going to depend on how well we cull their numbers in the months between them. Welp, Herace hoping all the lovely folks I helped awaken have put in the work to get used to their new level of power. Speaking of, we gonna do that again soon? Ben knew that word had been spread that there was a person who could awaken people with certain physical magics if they reached the 8th level of the skill, and there were plenty across the globe who'd been happy to work themselves to the edge of death for a chance to make that happen. The deadline's been placed, well, have you come a month out? Anyone who reaches it after that is out of luck until closer to the third wave, assuming you survive, that is. I'm personally a fan of operating on the assumption it'll be alive in a year, even if it is a bit of a big one to make. Wave 2 was the place where most of the worlds that had survived the first would end up falling. Not many made it to the third. With the way things had largely felt like they'd gone back to normal given how the first wave had ended, it could be easy to forget the severity of the danger they were in, but it was nipping at their heels, ready to take them all down. And not think about it. With only a little bit of peace left before things went to hell, he didn't want to dwell on the future, instead focusing on the present. It was a feeling Myriad was able to pick up on and was happy enough to share, with memories of the invasion filling his thoughts as well. The cube knew what was coming from first-hand experience. Better to not dwell on the inevitable and focus on the more peaceful present. In that case, will you go back to looking at the summoning spell? His god asked him. I think this is the longest break you've had from it in a while. A break extending to his return to Stonewall after the outsider had escaped into the world as Ben focused on other interests, both doing more reading and his secret project, as well as training his actualization, even if he didn't have any real use for it beyond the entertainment it provided him and its ability to satisfy his cravings. Something he put to use then and there as he created a bar of chocolate for himself and his god to enjoy while they talked. I'll get back to it tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe having a bit of time off was exactly what I needed to finally make some progress. Huh? You're free to hope as much as you want. After a night of talking with Myriad, passing the time the best he could while further refining his idea to put into practice later, Ben got up for the day, heading to the living room first instead of the kitchen like he normally would and finding Thera awake and hard at work, even if she looked like she wanted to be anything but. With the living room swarmed with spirits, it was obvious Shed spent a long night both giving them her mana as well as working on her spirit comprehension, even if that wasn't the original goal that had her out there. Morning. How'd it go? He asked her, watching as she yawned out an answer. I finally got a level to my sleep resistance, she told him, even if just how exhausted she sounded made the statement a little less than believable. And I officially never want to try to get another. They both knew she was going to be worked hard during the next wave, to the point that the gods had even gone out of their way to give her the skill despite how cheap they could be. But in the months since she'd gotten it, she hadn't managed to raise its level even once until then, leaving her to make a concentrated effort that past week to pull it off, just so she wouldn't completely fail at the expectations she had placed on her, no matter how much she may have hated it. Thera liked her sleep. Training to avoid it felt more like a punishment than anything else, no matter how handy it was going to be. Ugh. And I have stuff to do today too, she groaned. Then have a nap? Ben laughed. I'll wake you in an hour when breakfast is ready. No sooner than the words had left his mouth was it that she took him up on his offer, passing out without another sound and leaving Ben to grin, gently rubbing her head before heading to the kitchen to prepare a nice meal to start the day. If this is how she's looking after her first level, then someone should definitely recommend that she try to get second before the next wave if she can. Just not sure if I want to be the one to do it. After breakfast was done and Ben had managed to both lure Sonia out with the smell and wake up his very tired girlfriend, his first stop for the day wasn't to the shop like it normally would be, instead going to his empty house on the street, specifically around back where his greenhouse sat. Within stood a single fruit tree, even if one wouldn't think that at first glance. The structure was filled with stems and branches, all interconnected through the root network down below to ensure that every bit of it was still one singular plant for it to show its proper effects. Still possessed by the soul of one of the forbidden gods as well as a demon, the plant was still going strong. All the more so thanks to the powerful plant enchantments Ben had built into the enclosure and continuously improved, leading to the day's chores as he both clipped branches and harvested a mountain of fruits, throwing them all into boxes he had around that were bound with both space and time enchantments to let them hold more and keep their contents from rotting as he looked at his ever-grown hoard. At this point, even with the potions I'm sharing with Thera, Sonia, Fox, Satchel's party, and the stuff I'm mailing out to the Dryads, I think I have enough here that I could last for a few years if this stopped producing for some reason. He happily mused. I really should try and see if there's ever anything else I could do with these beyond just purely strengthening potions. If I could somehow configure them to focus on a singular attribute, then that would be ideal, but I don't really know where I'd start with trying to figure that out. Hey Myriad, are the gods doing any experimenting with their plants at least? Show me some notes. Yeah, but I don't care about my agility. Once that chore was done, Ben went to his true second home. Not the house he bought but would never use, but instead the shop, where Falk had already begun the day. Morning, Falk. Mornin', boy. Looks like you'll be having a busy one again. PFFF, when don't I? He was still getting large volumes of materials in, ensuring he'd be in a constant state of work through the use of his homunculi, but the gods had decided to give him more as well despite the outrageous fees he kept piling on them. As of only a couple days prior, on top of everything else, Ben was no longer just getting raw materials sent his way, but finished weapons and shields too, all of a lesser quality than he could make but there for a single reason. So he could enchant upon them. With the speed of his thoughts only ever growing faster and that same speed being the limiting factor to how quickly he could enchant, as his clones were producing everything else, his main body was focusing on enchanting everything, flying through weapons to empower them the best he could for what was to come and taking advantage of the experience that meant for him, being rewarded with the notification ringing out in his head. Score. He'd been expecting it soon given the time that had passed since he'd taken it combined with just how full of enchanting his days were with all of his work, with the new added load helping to push him over the edge to success as he touched his job crystal, thinking on what to pick next. Unlike the last few times, he had no new options, which in principle meant it should have been easy to pick his next one without anything new to consider, but despite himself he took a few moments. The author's tale has been misappropriated. Report any instances of this story on Amazon. He knew which job he wanted to have during the start of the invasion, and at only 2 months away that meant he should have had the time to squeeze out another one in the meantime, leaving it as a question of what as he looked at his long list. My very long list, actually. Let's see, it's not like it would do me any harm to trim it a bit, would it? Might give me a couple new advanced options too that I could think on. What the heck? It's not exactly the most efficient, but I'd only be losing, what, 20 minutes or an hour going through a couple. Why not? I've wanted to complete a few of the easier jobs anyway to see if it would land me a title related to finishing them. For now, it'll take Holy Craftsman. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get this finished already. Ultimately, it was a thought Head barely even had time to make. Forget when Head had his awakened skills, that was a job option Head gained all the way back when he was still in the early stages of his crafting skill. Compared to where he was currently at, the experience he required was practically nothing compared to what a single thing Head create would generate for him, let only what Head gain while his homunculi were still at work. It was over as soon as Head started, letting Ben pick his next job. Cursed Item Maker. Again, it was one that didn't need much in the way of experience, at least compared to what he knew he could put out, but what it did require was a little more specialized. He couldn't just make anything and expect it to be good enough. By any reasonable definition, it needed to be what the name implied, a cursed item. Not that that was going to take Ben very long either. In the same moment he took the job, he was already removing one of his bracelets to enchant on, placing both a petrifying effect to act on the person foolish enough to wear it as well as a mental compulsion to act on those within its range, making them want to take it for themselves. If he allowed it to go out into the wild, anywhere it ended up was sure to be left looking like a Gorgon's lair, with statues of all sorts of people standing around, having gotten the bracelet, only to have it stolen from them thanks to being too cursed to defend their prize. But before such a terrible future could come to pass, Head broken the enchantment on it once again with the sound of his job being completed thanks to the power and skill Head demonstrated for it. Which left the final of the fast ones he was looking at taking, with the last one to satisfy his curiosity more than anything else. A job that he could safely assume that Head be the first person in the world to take, meaning he had no way to know what would come of it as he thought out the one Head wanted. Give me actualizer. Why did it just give me vitality bonuses? If anything, given the fact that the skill seemed to solely have a mental cost, head expected pure intelligence bonuses like head receive for any mind job. What head gotten felt far more bizarre and made him resolve to remember to check his card in a bit to ensure he hadn't been secretly spending his life force this whole time without realizing it before he looked around to confirm his teacher was focused on his own tasks before Ben sat down and closed his eyes, bringing his mind up to his god's realm. What? Ben, shouldn't you be working? Myriad asked when he saw him, getting waved off as he did. Taking a small break, you always say I should try to do that a bit more, right? Yes, of course. I'm just surprised you're doing it willingly. But why did you come up here for it then? To satisfy my curiosity a bit, I suppose. Finished my current job and decided to take actualizer for fun, so I popped up here to finish it. There's something deeply troubling about the fact you took a job on a whim for a bit of fun and plan on finishing it immediately. Ben just shrugged. What can I say? I was curious, and seeing as how I'm already at the 9th level of the skill, it's not like I should even take that long. Plus, now that I've taken it, I've gotten to see that it's giving me vitality bonuses, so this will be a good way to make sure it's not killing me. Bizarre, but I suppose I approve of testing to make sure you're not about to accidentally end your own existence. In that case, make me something tasty while I work. You got it. With nothing left but to finish his current job, Ben began actualizing in his god's realm, creating a variety of dishes for Myriad to enjoy as he went through his tasks before eventually moving on to bigger things, recreating various buildings he'd been to in the most complete detail he could. From his home on Earth to his current one, the church he'd first stayed in when he'd arrived on that new world, and the mansion palace that Pelania and Abris enjoyed, it kept him busy enough that Ben didn't notice his god growing awfully still when he created Falk's shop, weapons and all. But after a bit of time passed and he got the notification he needed telling him he'd completed that job too, he destroyed each building to keep from cluttering the realm before he headed back down to take something harder. Not seeing any change in his vitality, Ben instead looked at what to take next. If he'd wanted to, Ben could have kept going. While he still planned on keeping most of his mind jobs for the eventual goal of helping to carry his friends through a few of their harder options, he could have taken mathematician since he had no plans of putting himself through the nightmare that would be doing math enough to cover for 6 people's worth of experience. That was a recipe for misery. In the same way, he could have easily finished each of the path jobs that had been sitting at the top of his list for ages, and even some of the advanced paths that would come after. It would certainly get him closer to any sort of hypothetical title, but given how uncertain it was that something like that would even exist and how little he cared about them as options when he still had so many more interesting ones around, he resolved himself to put it off as a later thing, something he could chip away at in between some grander jobs. After all, despite his hope about any potential rewards that might end up existing if he completed enough jobs, he had other hopes too. Hope that taking something bigger might give him something interesting when none of those smaller options he'd just sped through had granted him either skills or levels. All it came down to was which of the two he was thinking of to go with. Either Connect Master or another enchanter job. The first would be aimed at a skill he certainly wanted to develop more than he was currently managing, that much was certain, but at the same time, it was keeping up with his other core skills even without that and was likely to take longer than he really wanted. Probably even stretching into the second wave where using it on the invading demons would leave him with the risk of getting his soul injured again. And sure, I'd be able to get experience from killing demons instead, but I'm not certain about how it would compare to the experience I would get from using my skill normally. Better to just take another enchanter job. It'll take summoned enchanter. Not terrible but not ideal. Taking all of those jobs had only resulted in a single new one in the form of high actualizer, which was a bit of a shame, and while getting those 2 levels wasn't bad, it did feel a little underwhelming. Ideally, he'd been hoping for another level to his enchanting, but even without that he thought he might get another new skill or 2 no matter how insignificant they might have ended up being. Oh well, at least I got the job bonuses from finishing all that and the new ones, so I'll count that as a small win and just aim to get the most out of them I can with the time I still have. Besides, Summoned Enchanter is going to be getting some immediate work. After all, there were still a few hours of work in the day that would be filled with enchanting goodness before he moved on to his much grander project. One he felt certain would be earning him both a legendary item and a swath of new experience to go with it. When the day ended, Ben shoved crates and crates of weapons through his personal gate to Analia to let them handle their transport and distribution, while at the same time making room for all that was sure to be sent over the next day before he gathered everything he needed to and went off to his god's church, ready to make an idea a reality. And to start that, he made a necklace when he arrived, using his magic to shape and blend the various materials he had as needed to end with something designed to hold some planned enchantments in the future before heading down to the building's subbasement. At one time, it had been a place to store his various books which now lay empty, with all of them being moved up to the top floor to act as a library for any in the town to enjoy at their leisure. Originally, Head planned to leave the new space as a storage area for any future projects he didn't want to sell, but with the main basement still having plenty of space and him having enough wealth to buy entire buildings for storage should he need to, that meant he could use the private place for something slightly different. Preparing against his paranoia. Using a combination of magic materials, Ben essentially painted them onto the surrounding floors, walls, and roof with his magic, leaving a thin layer of each to match his planned enchantments later as he began his base one, something designed to help ensure his privacy from what prying eyes he could. Throughout the room, he applied some of the effects of King of Sacrilege. Well, what do you think? Oh, don't be like that, it's fine. Anyway, you know that's not what I'm asking. Oh, nothing too crazy. Just gonna prepare to open a gate to the infinite hells. More than anything else, there was a sense of defeat in Myriad's voice. A feeling that in every way that mattered, he really had failed to raise his apostle into someone half-decent, even with Ben rushing to defend himself. There's a very good reason for this, I promise. Myriad, we both know there are more than a couple gods who'd be happy to see me tossed into hell, and until recently I've felt at least semi-safe thinking they couldn't. With King of Sacrilege, the idea that they'd be able to rip my soul from my body seemed unlikely enough that I didn't really worry about it, but now I've seen that they don't have to. Anyone particularly motivated enough would be able to rip a hole under my feet and drop me in. I want to make sure that can't trap me. Okay, then I've got to say that you're overestimating how much effort it would take. Myriad, I've seen how the ritualists managed it, and based on that I've looked at how I'd modify the process. If I was either a non-affinity mage or an archmage, I could do it by myself. Maybe even a space mage if I was around the 5th awakened level. That statement was met with a moment of silence, Ben letting it hang in the air and Myriad taking it in for all the horrors it was worth before speaking again. This content has been unlawfully taken from Royal Road. Report any instances of this story if found elsewhere. Yeah, and honestly rather easily. Well, not exactly easily. The spells themselves would be complex and each would require a bit of rather esoteric knowledge with a few extra minds to help out, but if I were Jake I could do it right now with mana to spare. Hence why I want a way to pull myself out of the infinite hells if anyone ever pushes me in. Myriad sighed, sounding relieved. None, and he'll be building in a variety of failsafes to go with it too. But that's why I'm keeping this secret. Obviously, the other gods wouldn't be thrilled, and it wouldn't be much of a safety net if any other god knew to clip it if they wanted me gone. You got it. With his god as pacified as he was going to be, Ben was finally able to get to work. Really, he wasn't creating a single enchantment that might be able to pull him out of hell if need be, but several, all of them configured in different manners to give him the best chance of success, given that the only way to test it was to actually be in that lower realm. Something he was specifically hoping to avoid. But without testing, the only thing he could do was try to be broad about it and hope that should the worst come to pass. His clever mind and his planning for the worst would have been enough, with the core of each enchantment going down. Despite the number of ways he was doing it, some containing only non-affinity mana and others being mixes of affinities, with everything else he could think of in between, they all had one other skill tied to them: bind. In each instance of the spells he was creating, it was acting as one of the main markers, typing the necklace that would house most of the enchantment with the room where the gate to hell would open, with activating the necklace being the signal head need to get out of there, as he once again looked back on his past self with appreciation for taking the time to figure out how to use that difficult skill in such a way. When he finished with those core components, though, there was more for him to build on top of both the room and the necklace after to help perfect them. The room, of course, got a combination of death and light enchantments to deal with any ghosts that might make their way out with him. While there was of course the worry that there could be other things stuck in the hells like the outsider had witnessed before, given that only one had come through when the gate had been opened for so long, that wasn't an immediate concern. If something else did manage to escape, then he'd simply deal with that when the time came. That left the rest to apply to his new necklace, with his enchantments of choice there being largely life and time affinities, though enhanced with non-affinity options to dampen the effect his resistances would have on what was by and large being designed to help save his life if need be. Their purpose was simple. In the event of an emergency, they could be used to force some general life spells on his body while at the same time slowing down the time his cells would experience, giving him a better chance to get help. It was the exact sort of thing he would have wanted when facing off against Aether, or really for any emergency when Thera wasn't around to help put him back together. And while it wouldn't be pleasant, his minds would still move so much faster that if need be he could strain himself while under the effects. Of course, such a thing would only leave him with more injuries to deal with, but he decided to not dwell on that. If things had reached that point, then he'd simply deal with it and figure out the best option he could in the moment. And by the time the last enchantment was down, he received good enough news that the worry ceased to matter as his eyes told him he'd made another lower legendary item. Unnamed talisman from the craftsman Ben-Ha? Not for long. From here on out, you are officially named Failsafe. Seeing the information update before his eyes, he slipped it on over his neck to sit beside his other necklace, feeling a newfound level of security in its place. He didn't care if his god thought it was over the top or paranoid. He actually agreed, but it was a comfort in a world that seemed to want him dead far too often, one he wasn't going to deny himself the pleasure of. Thera was still exhausted after breakfast. An hour of sleep simply didn't cut it, but she did her best to put her new level of sleep resistance to use as she fought through it, telling herself it was just more training for the skill as a whole. And with a flood of spirits still around her, she gave them as much of her mana as she could as she went through town and to the deep woods beyond to train for a bit in peace. After her spirit empowering had changed to mana empowering, she hadn't known what to expect from the growth, but it appeared there was more to it than simply letting her give mana to the other mana-based lifeforms on the world, a fact she was seeing the more she used it. In the past, she had always lost more mana when trying to give it to a spirit she didn't share a magic with compared to those she did. But that difference seemed to be gone now that it had awakened, and not only that, the amount she needed to transfer overall seemed to have plummeted. At the 9th level, she could give a point of mana to an earth spirit and they'd receive a point, as simple as that, but in its new form, every point she gave seemed to temporarily boost the recipient's own regeneration rates, letting them top up to full for a fraction of the mana cost, with the results being obvious. More and more the spirits swarmed her when she wasn't busy to take advantage of her power. Not that she minded. They were all always more than friendly, and it was making the number of them explode in the world. As long as she was around, none of them would deal with the weakness that came with their normal acts of reproduction, and the more there were, the better everyone would be as a result. It was a win-win all around, and even if they did choose to abandon the world after the 2nd wave or sometime during the 3rd, it was still worth it to her. Her father's people would live and were even on the edge of thriving. No matter what the outcome, it was a positive, something that she could at least take comfort in if things were to go wrong when the gates across the globe once more opened up. Princess, 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 but I'm never going to get used to this. Sorry everyone, I'm going to need to focus just a little bit, so I might not be the most talkative right now, don't mind me. She didn't want to just ignore them, but she was out there for a reason in the end. To practice. It had been a while since Yuliel and Vasta had suggested she try to create her own spell, something that would incorporate and suit the magics she had access to, and since then she hadn't made any progress. There were a few excuses, of course. Shed had her vacation, and then there was the nightmare of how it ended. Plus, when she wasn't practicing her magic or taking lessons, she was either out hunting with Aso or going out for clinic work, as well as trying to get her way through her current job. But all of that was exactly that, excuses. She wasn't having luck because she couldn't think of which direction to go. It was as simple as that. And I'm not quite sure I'm ready to take any of Ben's suggestions. She thought to herself as she reflected on some of the ideas he'd been able to spit out without a second thought. From the purely life affinity ossification, which would convert a body to bone akin to petrification's effects but being irreversible due to the nature of the spell, to binding life and dark together in a curse of permanent weakness on whoever it touched. He was willing to get creative in ways she wasn't sure she was entirely comfortable with considering herself, even if the ends might justify the means. She was a powerful mage, she wouldn't even want to deny it. Now that she had more control than any point in the past combined with her outrageous mana, levels were coming easier to her than they had any right to and would likely keep on coming. If the world survived and she gained any level of fame for herself, she didn't want to be recognized for turning people to bone or weakening them beyond measure. But that's just what I don't want to do. It doesn't exactly give me a path forward. So with nothing else she could think of, she passed the time by experimenting, moving her various types of mana in a variety of ways, waiting for inspiration to strike as the time passed. It didn't help that she was still tired, but she just wanted to get something, to feel an idea fall into place as the woods around her were torn up and broken down, only stopping when a spirit spoke up. "Princess, there is a demon nearby," it told her, more than willing to handle it itself but knowing that killing it would provide some small boost to her growth, even if only a drop. "Should we leave it to you? Please point me in the direction." Even if it was just one, a demon was a demon. There was no way she could leave it, and if it was close enough, why not enjoy the minor benefits that killing it would bring? So with it in the spirit's senses, they led her deeper into the woods until she was able to eye it in the distance. Unlike many others she'd seen, there was nothing particularly remarkable about that one, looking like thousands of others she'd witnessed in the first wave. Not that she cared. It was going to die, that was all it came down to, so while it was still in the distance she cast out her charm, calling it over while at the same time preparing a different dark spell, strengthening it with all she could. The one she used was simple. In every way that mattered, it weakened the beast, sapping it of its strength, stamina, and whatever mana it held. As it felt the call of her charm, it ran to her, with the second effect slowing it to a walk, and then a crawl in its futile attempt to reach her, putting up a good effort too. It was only a few meters away by the time it stopped moving, falling into mana exhaustion only moments later. After that point it took 2 full minutes for the creature to finally die, having lost even the strength to breathe by that point, all while Thera watched on, reaping the benefits of that use of skill. The little bit of experience from both using her spells and killing the demon did it, pushing her over the edge and finally letting her take a new job for herself as she looked at her options, even if she knew what she was going to pick. Available jobs: musician, professional dancer, bard, darkness mage charm specialized, healer, staff user, homunculus creator, chimera maker, war mage, empathy mage, barrier mage, a high crystallization mage, master spirit mage, a non-affinity mage, heretic, dark princess. While the expected dark princess was there as an option, it still brought a frown to her face. Not for what it was. She'd more or less accepted that she was going to be getting that variant the moment she started walking the dark path. No, what made her frown was the lack of other options. Just like when she'd completed Master Earth Mage, she was only given the one. Unauthorized duplication. This tale has been taken without consent. Report sightings. Seriously, I've had 4 for life after I finished the Master Branch. Why has my worst affinity given me my most options? It was a question she knew she wasn't going to get an answer to, even if she tried to keep it from bothering her. After all, while she was lacking in certain specialized mage paths, she wasn't when it came to what she suspected would be more broad ones. Since Dark Princess would almost certainly be a job she'd gain passive experience through like the others, she was already planning on taking War Mage for the next wave, if only to see what benefits it would bring, and then she'd still have Master Spirit Mage. It had of course become available when she'd awakened her Spirit Empowering, but it had Mage right in the name. There was no way it would do nothing for her magics, so she tried to keep positive as she took the one she'd been aiming for so long. It'll take Dark Princess. Name Thera Oris. Race: Succubus/Spirit Hybrid. Titles: Spirit Child, Madman's Lover, Spirit Princess, Saintess, Destined Holder of Spirit Empowering, Outsider Slayer. Jobs: Dark Princess, LV9. Previous jobs: Beginner Dancer, Dancer, Apprentice Mage, Earth Mage, True Mage, High Earth Mage, Spirit Mage, Life Mage, High Life Mage, Telekinetic Mage, Adventurer, High Telekinetic Mage, High Spirit Mage, Master Earth Mage, Earth Princess, Master Life Mage, Life Princess, Saintess, Crystallization Mage, Master Adventurer, Queen of Mana, Mana Embodiment, Dark Mage, High Dark Mage, Master Dark Mage. Attribute: a Vitality, 2784. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 49 per hour. Mana, 657,632. Mana recovery rate, 361 per minute. Strength, 572. Agility, 1160. Stamina, 1012. Intelligence, 1210. Affinities, a light, 4. Life, 22. Fire, 11. Water, 14. Air, 12. Earth, 103. Death, 3. Dark, 43. Space, 2. Time, 1. Resistances, a light, 5. Life, 9. Fire, 11. Water, 16. Air, 12. Earth, 35. Death, 13. Dark, 42. Space, 7. Time, 8. Blessed skills. Spiritual Earth Magic LV7 *. Spiritual Dark Magic LV3 *. Passive skills. World Speak Plus. Coordination LV6. A Bind. Mana Recovery Rate Enhancement LV9. Earth Sense LV7. Dark Sight LV0. A Mana Enhancement LV3. A Magic Inclination LV2. Sacrilege LV0. Sleep Resistance LV1. Active Skills. Calculate LV3. Dance LV5. The String Instrument LV4. A Woodwind Instrument LV3. Cleaning LV2. Staff Wielder LV1. Meditation LV2. Speed Reading LV5. Spiritual Life Magic LV7 *. Overwhelming Non-Affinity Magic LV0 *. Mana Empowering LV0 *. Cooking LV1. A Mana Examination LV9. Spirit Comprehension LV1. Blessings. Anilia's Blessing. Elvet's Life Magic Blessing. Quack's Blessing. Eneth's Blessing. Earth Pantheon's Blessing. Life Pantheon's Blessing. Dark Pantheon's Blessing. Usus Mana Regeneration Blessing. Trials. Trial of Analia and Talona. Earth Tower. Life Tower. Dark Tower. And this is instantly all worth it. As nice as getting the level to her dark magic and other skills felt, as far as she was concerned, the real boon was getting the one to her spirit comprehension. She'd been getting better at not letting her thoughts slip through to the ones around her without meaning to, but with that little bit of extra control the task felt significantly easier. She was sure she'd be able to keep her thoughts to herself, at least when it really mattered. Which now just leaves a question of how fast I'm going to try to level this. I do already get passive experience, but I'm pretty sure I could technically get a fair bit more if I'm willing to. It was a question of what she was willing and not willing to do, namely charming her mana. While it was no longer happening automatically within her soul, she was sure she could make it if she so chose, which in principle should have been akin to constantly casting a dark spell. If she was to, she'd need to put on her brace again for the time being, but when she thought about it, it didn't feel nearly as bad to her as she'd expected. Sure, it had been a huge issue for her in the past, but now it was something she'd be able to control. She wouldn't exactly like it, but the fact that she'd be able to stop at any moment made the idea significantly more acceptable than it otherwise would have been. So alone in the woods she did it, just for a moment, just as a test, even if the surroundings responded to her in a big way with the sounds of creatures moving towards her and kept going even after she canceled it, leading her to prepare another spell on her fingertips with fear ready to counteract the draw of the charm. Definitely should have grabbed my brace first. She sighed to herself. Dumb idea. Wish I could scare them off as easily. She felt something click in her with the thought. Who was to say she couldn't? Her charm may have merged into her dark magic, but who was to say that she couldn't apply a different spell to herself to give off? At the very least, she couldn't think of any reason it wouldn't work, so she gave it a try, fiddling around as she tried to influence the mana stored within her soul in a way other than the one she'd been born to. And only after seeing some distant beasts being lured over felt it click and got to watch the immediate change as they started to flee instead, running for their lives like death itself was chasing them. Interesting. She undid the effect but was suddenly full of ideas. If she could do it with those two dark spells, could she do it with more complicated ones? And what about her other affinities? Could she attach some general healing spells to her soul to provide some passive benefits to any hospital she was in, or could she use earth spells to affect the world around her? Could she mix affinities to create more complex options, and could her non-affinity magic be incorporated too? Before Shed had no ideas, but suddenly she was flooded with them. Her head filled with things to test as a path to her individual way of using magic began to look more clear. Even though it wasn't too late by the time Ben got home, he still found Thera asleep when he arrived, no doubt still tired from trying to raise that one skill, along with her more personal practice Shed done throughout the day. It didn't seem like she had any intention of waking up either, so he did his best not to disturb her, and with it looking like Sonia was going to be spending the night with his teacher, he prepared himself a simpler meal than he normally would before turning in early for the night and forcing his mind up to his god's realm, where the other three were already waiting. "Good evening, my lovelies," he greeted them positively. "Who's up for a fun evening of everyone's favorite?" "That's right, we're talking about research." "You are way too enthusiastic about this," Myriad said with a shake. "I haven't touched the summoning spell or the mystery one in ages at this point. I need to get back to it. Tomorrow I should head over to the center too and see if Kufno has anything new for me. At the very least, they should have gotten through some of the brute forcing they've been trying to do, but for now, without further ado." He brought up both the summoning spell as well as the mystery one from the archive and looked the two over briefly before sighing in contentment. "Oh yeah, just the break I needed. Only a maniac would consider that a break," his god muttered as Ben examined one of the spell structures Head just brought forth, eyeing it for just a second before separating out two seemingly random sections from the summoning one and tossing them to the side so he could stare at what remained, leaving the gods with him to wonder what he was doing. "Ben, what was that about?" Hellori asked, looking at the banished segments in an attempt to understand the thought process behind the act. What's what about?" he asked in return, still focusing on the majority of it he had left. "The part you just threw away? Oh, that? There's just no point in wasting time on solved segments, is there? Better to focus on the bits we still need to figure out." "I'm sorry, what the hell do you mean, solved segments?" "The section for opening up a reality and the one for protecting anyone traveling through the chaos. Come on guys, focus here." It was what he wanted to do at least as he directed his eyes at the massive amount that remained. But after a few moments of silence where the three gods quietly looked between themselves, Myriad was the one who spoke up. "Ben, focus on me for a minute and explain. How could you possibly be so sure of that?" "What do you mean, how do I know that?" The second had seen it in front of him. He took it to be a solved problem, one that wasn't even worth thinking about when there was still more to discover, but he had no reason to feel so certain of that fact. So why was it so self-evident to him even then as he looked back at the two segments, trying to understand his deeper thought processes, only for echoes to light up in his head? As he looked at them, each of his minds started to ring, flashing out scenes of the unnatural monster that had invaded their reality. His glimpses into the infinite hells, and most of all, the primordial chaos Head stared into as he was violently forced from the realm, pulled back down by his body as it started to heave and only giving him just enough time to run from bed to find a place to vomit before he started to calm down. "Don't think about it." "No, I need to actually think about this. But in a couple minutes." Those were a couple minutes that he used to clean himself up just a bit and wash out his mouth before slinking off to the couch with a garbage can in hand before forcing his mind back up to face the gods who were watching him with concern. "Ben, what was that?" Myriad asked him in clear worry, getting an honest but altogether unsatisfying response in exchange. "I don't know." He didn't know why his minds had flashed so strongly to the chaos, nor why it had caused such a violent reaction in himself, worse than when Head even seen it in person, even if one other thought whispered in his ear as he reflected. "If you spot this tale on Amazon, know that it has been stolen. Report the violation. Witness of chaos." The statement on his status that was maybe a blessing, even if there was far too much to call it into question for him to accept it as such no matter where it was placed on his card. Since Head first gotten it, it hadn't seemed to have any noticeable effect, and after eventually bringing it up with Nair and Hellori, neither of whom could give him much more help as far as it was concerned, he eventually elected to not worry about it. A choice he was beginning to regret as he explained exactly what happened to the waiting gods, watching all three try to hide their concern. It was obviously unexpected, and since none of them could tell what it was even doing to him, there was no way they could just look at it as some simple thing. But without options, Hellori tried to take a positive approach to keep from worrying the mortal. If we can confirm the information is correct, at least then this really is a big breakthrough. That would point to it being positive at least, she said, trying to raise the moods around her. So that just leaves verifying. Yeah, I figured as much, Ben nodded. And I also have the impression that trying to do that is gonna leave me barfing even more, so let's get this over with. Even though they felt solved to him, Ben stared at the 2 sections head removed, trying to backtrack through the subconscious chain of thoughts that had led to that feeling, with his stomach twisting and warping each time as his mind kept flashing back to the chaos as if the answer for him was there. It's not, he told himself as he brought himself back to the realm for the 4th time. It's in my head and it's in front of me. Forcing himself to keep down what little was left in his stomach, he confronted the chaos head-on, letting the feeling of it hit him as he examined the structure, putting together what he could best describe as a soft picture of why he believed what he did. It was built upon assumptions and feelings, but at the same time was all things that he could not only test but build upon. It's like there's been some massive change to my subconscious I just haven't noticed because I haven't thought about the primordial chaos, he muttered aloud. It's like connections have been made in my head amongst things I know, half know, theorize, and suspect, all of which leads to just one real question. What? His God wanted to know, with the other 2 just as eager for the answer. Why the hell hasn't this helped me awaken lesser inspiration? Ben, be serious here. I am being serious. Lesser inspiration is a skill that acts on the subconscious to help with exactly what I just described. The fact that I'm suddenly making enough connections that I can look at a portion of this spell and have a good idea of what it's about is huge. Even if I'm only seeing the parts that relate to the chaos this clearly, I should be able to use the stuff this is helping me to figure out to get huge swaths of the rest of the spell. Hell, look at how much smaller the archive spell is. I might be able to figure out its purpose in a few months, a year tops at this rate. All because I suddenly have so much more to work off of. I absolutely should have awakened lesser inspiration with all of that going on. I suppose if it's acting on your mind in a different way from your skill, then it might not have done the job, Nair mused. But there's really no way to know for sure. More importantly, now that you've been doing this for a while, how are you feeling, Ben? Ugh, sick, sore, mentally exhausted in a way that usually takes months of constant work. Also mildly worried about the fact that I only ever gain more changes to my mind. Seriously, I'm beginning to think it might be just me dealing with this sort of stuff. It is just you, Myriad told him in no uncertain terms. Literally, not a joke, 100% just you. Who else do you think would possibly have to deal with this much nonsense? I really feel like at least a couple of the other summoned should be having to deal with a certain level of bullshit too. Nobody else on the planet has to deal with a few thousand minds in their heads, let alone has looked into the chaos between realities. Hey now, that's not exactly right, and there's an idea. What about the gods who've actually gone out there? Surely they must have some experience with this, right? Well, 1, as you've already mentioned, a part of the spell is there specifically to protect them, and 2, which is important, so listen close, there's a huge difference between the mind of a mortal and a god. Like, is there really though? Maybe not for you, Hellori muttered, even as Myriad went on. A big enough one that I'd still fully expect your brain to be fried in any attempt to connect to one. Okay, but I don't think with my brain, I use my big, juicy soul. And yet my statement still stands. But seeing as that's not an avenue, Nair cut in. It would be best to pursue another. Ben, go see Verbum tomorrow, and no matter how long it takes, read through every bit of system information that comes up when he looks at that blessing. Should it take you hours or even days of reading, so be it. It's become apparent this is something you need proper answers for. Alright, fine, but seeing as how that's a morning problem for the time being. He gestured broadly as the summoning spell, with his god looking at him in disbelief. You cannot be serious right now. Hey, even if my mind's gonna break or I'm gonna go insane, this is officially an avenue of progress, a huge one, and with nothing else to do until morning we might as well keep chipping away at this. Until you're sick again. I'll eat a big breakfast to make up for it. Besides, whatever answers I get, it's not like I can just stop working on this forever. They wanted to answer that he very much could. The problem was that he wouldn't, but all 3 knew that wouldn't sway him. So with nothing else to deter them, they went on in their study, even if all were left significantly more worried in the process. When Ben finally left for the day, The three were left to themselves in Myriad's realm where they were free to talk without prying ears, each of them having things to say and feeling about what just happened, with Myriad making his own clear by finally letting himself crash down before he started to complain. Obviously I was worried when he got that stupid thing, but when days and weeks passed without anything happening I thought we were in the clear. No, that's not right. I just stopped thinking about it and hoped for the best, which I'm now very much regretting. I feel like months of worry have finally caught up with me all at once. Have we seen any other effects? Hellori asked. It didn't give him any skills when he got it, right? What about his attributes? If it's really a blessing, then you'd expect it to help them grow. Impossible to say, Myriad complained. Look at everything within my apostle status, Hellori. It would be easy to not even notice a standard blessings effects amongst all of the jobs, titles, and even other blessings. Maybe it's giving them some sort of small boost, but it could just as easily only be targeting his subconscious mind. And has there been any change in his personality since he's gained it? Nair asked. Acting out of sorts, doing different things, responding in strange ways? Myriad's mind immediately flashed to the very thing his apostle had built in his church's subbasement before dismissing the idea out of hand. As unfortunate as it was, making a potential portal to hell felt all too in character for the boy, not leaving anything else to come to mind. Is it too much to ask that this stupid thing make him a little more reasonable? He wondered aloud, feeling Hellori placing a comforting hand on his side. She may not have been aware of what Ben had secretly done, but she certainly understood the sentiment behind it. The real issue is what this has come to, the goddess side. As unfortunate as it is, Ben seeing Verbum was probably the correct call, but that does open up the potential for another god to see this new blessing bound to him. Seeing the record holder was an obvious option right when Ben had gained the blessing, but they'd chosen to wait and see to avoid just such a thing. While there was no guarantee anyone would be watching either Ben or Verbum to see the skills bound to his soul through that summon's eyes, it was a possibility they'd hoped to avoid. So what if Ben completed jobs quickly and was prone to titles in a way none before him had been? Those were known facts by that point, same with his skill in raising his levels. But now, on top of everything else, he somehow also had something worrying in his blessings to go along with the rest, something that was sure to draw eyes and questions. And if they could convince the rest that it had somehow just formed from the chaos, then maybe things wouldn't be so bad. But there was another option, incorrect though it may be, that some might turn to. There were going to be those who'd believe he was given it by the outsider. This story has been taken without authorization. Report any sightings. There was no hiding the fact that Ben had its imprisoned soul, with only a few having bothered to ask if they should take it from him. They all knew at that point he'd fight the attempt, and after what he'd done for the world it would be hard for any to justify, no matter how much some might dislike him. But there were always those who'd look for whatever excuse when dealing with a perceived slight. This was just going to create an avenue for problems to be born in the future. I'll do my best to arrange an emergency meeting tomorrow around when things are going on with him, Nair reassured. We actually have a decent amount of the summoning spell figured out for the first time ever. So long as we fudge how it was determined a bit, then that's a reasonable enough justification for such a thing, even if there's going to be a few who won't like it. That should hopefully keep prying eyes away for the time being. Of course, it will get out eventually since he spends time with the soul mages on occasion, but it's better than nothing. That would be helpful. Thank you, Myriad said in appreciation before going back to the main matter. I just wish I understood how this happened to begin with. It felt like the sort of thing they'd never get an answer to, but Hellori at least seemed to have a theory. We know from the Grey that it's possible for things to adapt to the chaos after being born to a universe. It's not just things spontaneously generated out there, she reasoned. Maybe Ben's just gone through an early stage of that? You have to admit, if it would keep him from at best dying or at worst mutating into an untold monstrosity if he ended up between realities, it would certainly qualify to be called a blessing. But he didn't even have a finger crossover, Myriad argued. By all reasonable standards, he's barely been exposed to the chaos. But he saw it. No, let's be accurate here, he witnessed it just like his blessing says. Plus, just because he didn't cross over, who's to say nothing got in? Some tiny waves of pure uncertainty that could have latched onto his soul, which isn't even considering the benefit he has that could have made it easier. Not just a healthy number of other blessings to improve his odds. He has the system as a whole, A tool designed to help people grow and eases certain burdens on souls in the process. A tool itself designed to grow and help others grow. Who's to say it didn't play a part in ensuring that he got the best possible outcome?
Nare.
Myriad asked, turning to the primary architect of the system itself. What do you think? It's possible, I suppose. He eventually gave in. Like she said, it was made to grow, though that would be a bit more significant than I'd expect. Still, if we consider the fact that it was likely bound to the outsider, then it might have learned from its experiences if we assume that thing was born to a different universe first and had to adapt to the chaos as well. In the end, it's impossible to say for certain though. I suppose we could get Ben to try and get that bit of information from the system itself through verbum, Hellori mused. Though I can't imagine how long and hard that would be to successfully pull out. Things are bad enough when the record holder has something right before his eyes. Imagine how much information the system would spit out for an open-ended question like that. They didn't need to. At the speed Ben could already read at, certain inquiries could still take him days to get through. Something that broad, though? They'd be talking in terms of straight months, if not years. In the end, all they were doing was musing and theorizing, though. So from there they moved on to the far more productive discussion of just how they wanted to call their meeting to ensure as few eyes would be on Ben as possible in the day to come. Slipping off early the next day, Ben's first stop was to his research center, expecting to be alone when he got there but getting the surprise of seeing someone else so early in the morning. Kufno, what the heck are you doing here this hour? Ben, his employee, greeted. I've just been organizing some of our records. If I'd known you were going to be showing up today, I would have tried to get them touched up days ago. You really don't need to worry too much about it. I don't expect you or anyone else to put in more than the agreed hours. I'm simply an early riser who enjoys an interesting problem, the man shrugged. And there aren't any more interesting around than this. True enough, just don't feel obligated to do anything extra you don't need to. It'll feel like a slave driver. I'll keep that in mind. So may I show you to our newest records then? In a second, that's only half the reason I'm here. Expending a fair chunk of his power, Ben materialized multiple books, all filled with information on the sections he believed were solved before placing them on the table to the side. The gods and I believe we have a pretty decent grasp on a couple portions of the spell. We'd just need them to be tested a bit. Along with the background knowledge, I've outlined a few experiments to be run to test against some of the assumptions we have in there, so if you and your team could read through those and run them when you get the chance, I'd appreciate it. If it works, then we're about to have a giant leap forward in progress. In that case, it'll make reading the priority for the next 2 days and we'll move on to experimentation once everyone at least has the background information. You're the best. So with that out of the way, it'll get my reading done quick and get out of your hair. He went to the shelves of documents from there, raising swaths of them into the air and letting pages flutter past his eyes as he took in the available information, already seeing areas that would either verify or else hint towards the accuracy of some of the predictions he'd already made, acting as more points of data that whatever was happening within the recesses of his subconscious was at least managing to be helpful. Even if it would be cool if the fundamental way I think didn't keep changing with every little thing. There was no god around to comment on the idea that staring through the universe to the chaos beyond was just some little thing, and with the only noises in his head being his swarm of thoughts, he bid his goodbyes to Kufno, off to see if he could get some answers to the new, strange feature of his status. The narrative has been illicitly obtained. Should you discover it on Amazon, report the violation. Hey Verbum. The other summoned met Ben's happy greeting with a quiet stare for a second before breaking down to a tired sigh. I'm assuming it's witness of chaos you want me looking at this time? Pretty please, buddy. Anything I can use to narrow it down a bit first? Unfortunately not. Fine, let's get this over with. With Verbum resigned enough to Ben's request that he didn't bother putting up a fight, Ben was able to take in mounds of information as he prompted the record holder to move at ever greater speeds, letting Ben take in more all the faster to let the other enjoy his peace, even if what he was seeing was going to require some interpretation on his part. He knew about the nature of his mind, at least to a greater degree than an average person, and he knew all there was to know about the chaos that the gods of the world and the gray beyond it could teach. All he had to do was fit those bits of knowledge into the things he was reading through Verbum's eyes. But it wasn't easy. He didn't know why the system would spit out so much seemingly unrelated information to mostly straightforward questions, being forced to assume that it was seeing things and connections that he just wasn't. The only other assumption he could make was that it was making mistakes, something he'd prefer not to believe, not only because it wouldn't be helpful, but because it would call into question everything he would learn that way. And I'd like to at least do ne'er the courtesy of not operating on the assumption that his masterpiece is full of errors, but I'm pretty sure that would be better for me than what I think I'm actually reading. Cutting through the seemingly meaningless sections, Ben was left with something, more of an implication than a certainty as he looked through it all. An implication that that brief window to the chaos may not have just changed him, but could still be changing him, slowly adapting him to it in the way certain outsiders would manage to in order to survive that mad realm, with the implication of it leaving him more worried than anything. So it looks like this blessing didn't come from some external factor, but instead it's my soul's reaction to being exposed to it? So then why isn't it listed as a passive skill? I guess there's a chance I've been affected by something leaking in from the chaos itself, but Thera was right beside me when it happened. If I was going to be affected, then so should she. Does it literally just come down to the difference being that I witnessed it in a way she didn't? And this does lead to a few other pretty big questions for me. It seems like it's going to keep changing me instead of being a one-time effect. But how? Is it just going to keep acting on my subconscious mind? Is it just going to make me better equipped for dealing with the chaos if I ever encounter it again in the future? I don't think it should be having a physical effect by the looks of it, thank God. No turning into some sort of eldritch monstrosity for Ben this time. Of course, it would be entering the chaos that might do that, not adapting to survive it, so maybe this will be a good thing if I ever fall out of reality. Please, if there is some sort of omnipotent, omniscient God secretly watching over the multiverse, don't let me fall out of reality. On a last note, it does make me wonder how it would interact with the outsider job if I were to ever take it. Would it speed up the changes I'm going through or alter them in some way? Maybe even making new changes? Wow, I hate that I'm feeling curious about this. Note to self, try to take some of the other more useful or interesting jobs before I ever get to that point. Everything he'd read brought a lot to his mind to think about and consider, but in the end of it all, he couldn't escape the worry the change provoked in him as he was forced to confront some unknown, deep changes to his subconscious thoughts. Hey, how was the day? Thera greeted him brightly when he returned, seeming to be positively vibrating with excitement on her own part. From the looks of it, nowhere near as good as yours. What's the good news? I made some progress on the little project Yuliel and Vasta gave me. With her having gone to sleep early the other day and Ben having left early that morning, she'd never gotten the chance to tell him about the progress she'd made for her magic, nor the discoveries that had led to. She could equip spells to passively cast with her soul, with all of the potential of such a thing to follow. Not just the charm and fear she'd tried at first. When it came to her dark magic, she could also cast debuffs and other options in the same way. Of course, that wasn't going to be the most helpful thing out during the next wave. The issue with passive magics was that they spread out uncontrollably after all, meaning she'd be affecting friend and foe alike, but it did lead to a few other discoveries to go with it. She could operate beyond just the dark affinity, binding general healing spells to herself that she'd be able to make use of in any clinic setting, both letting those who happen to be around her passively heal their smaller injuries while at the same time making it easier for the other healers around to do more while spending less mana, with other applications from there. While casting buffs that way would have the same problem as dark effects, and the uses of earth and non-affinity both seemed a lot more limited, at least under the scope of what she could find out in the span of 2 days of practice. There was something else she'd use her mana for that she'd found immediate success with. Mana empowering. Oh sweet, so you can let them just take your ambient mana now without needing to consciously think about it? Yeah, after I figured it out, I spread the word that I'll be equipping it while I'm asleep, so we might end up slightly more swarmed than usual. But the benefits for the spirits are going to be huge. Her excitement was palpable and Ben didn't blame her. She'd just figured something huge out for herself, and from the sounds of it, her paternal race as a whole. If the spirits weren't going to need to wait for her to transfer over her mana but could now take advantage of her effects by simply being around her, then their numbers were sure to explode even more than they already had been doing, which was going to be a healthy plus for the planet on top of everything else. And they already love her. I wonder if Thera's sheer presence is getting to the point for them that they won't just immediately turn tail and leave if things get too rough here for us. At the very least, it might mean they stay longer than they otherwise would to help. This tale has been pilfered from Royal Road. If found on Amazon, kindly file a report. But anyway, what's going on with you? She asked him. Once her own excitement was out of the way, it was a lot easier to notice that something seemed to be on his many minds, that while not obviously negative, was enough to weigh on him in a way that lightly touched his expression. It's this whole thing. The gods are worried about my weird blessing, and after looking into it a bit, so am I if I'm being honest. Okay. Anything that's enough to worry you worries me. What's happening? It looks like witness of chaos is having some sort of effect on my mind. Thera sat in silence for a moment, waiting for more and only speaking up when it seemed like that was the end of it. So the problem is? That I'm afraid I'm going to go insane? What, is that all? Is that not enough? Your mind does change pretty frequently, Ben. Yeah, but not like this. I'm being serious, Thera. Witness of chaos. Whatever it does, I still feel the things I've seen clawing at my mind. I literally just discovered that I can suddenly interpret a pretty huge swath of the summoning spell for no reason other than it's the part for traveling between universes. I have no clue what else this is doing to me either. Even though he wasn't trying to show it, there was worry in his voice. Head at least understood every other change his mind had gone through to one extent or another, but not that one. It was a mystery to him even after plunging the depths of the system on it, and that made it more worrying than anything else. Seeing that, Thera placed a gentle hand on his cheek, trying to calm him down. Ben, since I've known you, the way you've thoughts only become weirder and weirder, you know that? Your mind has changed and split and been torn to shreds multiple times, and that's not even mentioning the level of control you have over the way you think. Who else on the planet can deconstruct their consciousness and have it merge into other people's or any of the other crazy things you do? Thera, Ben, despite all of that, despite every ridiculous change that's gone through your head, in the end it's always still you, she told him. It doesn't matter if you think with your brain or your soul, with one mind or thousands, you're still the same man I've known for years. Whatever's going on, you'll get through it and it'll be here for you the entire time, so if it's a problem, don't stress on it. You'll figure it out. When she put it like that, it was reassuring. She was right. Sure, Head undergone changes to the way Head think, but they'd never changed who he was, not really, and with the state of his mind, he could keep examining himself to make sure that was still the case. Even reflecting on his thoughts and actions from before and after Head gained the new blessing, no change seemed as though it hadn't come from within himself or been an appropriate product of his environment. He had the mental facilities to examine himself for changes and from there decide what they meant for him, for good or ill. You know, I think the gods could learn a thing or two from you about reassuring people, he told her with a smile, feeling a little less worried that he had been coming back from the library. What can I say, I'm wonderful, she smiled back, leaning into him. You can show me how much you appreciate what a light I am in your life if you'd like. Happy to show her all the appreciation she wanted for easing her thoughts in the bit of privacy they had. Ben kissed her, more than pleased to go on and enjoy the night. With the morning came the new day, one that Ben decided wouldn't be spent on things outside of his control, instead devoting it to chores he knew he needed to get out of the way for the upcoming wave. Really, there was a pile of them, but he let Thera talk him into one in particular before moving on to the rest. Practicing. Ben was going to be going between various invasion points with her, and he didn't intend to just be a tag-along. That meant he needed to be prepared to fight to whatever extent he could in the ways that suited him most. But the few ways he could weren't something he devoted much time to when his hours were much better spent on acts of creation. Being on the front lines, though, that needed to change, so he resolved himself to use at least a bit of the time left they had on practicing the more combative applications of his skills, leading himself and Thera to heading out to the town's public training grounds. As she pulled out and shaped multiple lumps of dirt from the ground below, practicing her multitasking by carrying them through the air with her power, Ben was treating them as targets, using both one of his guns as well as his magic to try and hit them while she did all she could to avoid his shots, leaving the sky above a mess of movements and collisions as they both put to use some of the finer bits of their skills. And as time went on, both largely ended up treating it like a game as much as they were viewing it as a chance to improve their skills, with Ben in particular reminded about the carnivals of Earthhead enjoyed as he took his shots, watching many of them hit, even if he knew that when it came time he'd be able to do better than he currently was for the difference in what he was shooting at. Ben's power was never going to beat out a piece of stone Thera had strengthened. He knew that much for sure, but that wasn't true of the more fleshy bodies he'd be aiming at in the near future. Not only would the demons be pouring out in a volume that would make it hard to actually miss, but when shooting at flesh, there was practically no way that his attacks wouldn't tear through them, able to take out multiple ones at once so long as he paid the slightest bit of attention to where he was making his shots. Which means I should maybe consider taking high tank instead of what I was originally planning. He mused to himself. I'd definitely be able to get enough experience doing that compared to what I want to go with. But nah, as nice as the bonuses to my defensive skills would be, I have my goals. Still, it didn't hurt to consider how he might make the most of his strengths. So for the next attack he materialized a thin film around the bullet he was firing off, barely spending any of his mana compared to the power behind the attack as he watched it hit and judged the viability of doing that in the war. Let's see, creating a poisonous layer on the things I shoot out with my magic won't necessarily be useless, but I'm confident that the first things I hit will be killed easily enough and probably the second too, which just means it would be to damage the third demon my shots either pass through or land in. Except if I'm assuming I'll be able to successfully shoot through two demons with one bullet first, the effect of passing through their bodies feels like it would have a decent chance of wiping away most of the poison before it can show its effect where it would be most needed. Which means it's probably a less useful way of spending mana than just saving that bit to shoot more. A shame. Unauthorized use of content. If you find this story on Amazon, report the violation. It had felt like a decent idea right until Head tested it too, leading to just a bit of disappointment before he moved on, accepting the results and thinking on what to try next as he materialized a small cube on a whim and shot it out, observing the effect as it completely missed its target. Sacrificing power, wind resistance, and accuracy was obviously never going to work. A shame though. I am the apostle of Myriad. Mowing down demons with cubic bullets would be a hell of a calling card. It had just been an idle whim though, one he hadn't had any real expectations for yet left him with an idea as he materialized a different shape and let it hang in the air as he pointed straight forward, not aiming at any of Thera's targets as he shot it off but hitting one nonetheless. But even if I can't make the cube idea work, I can affect the trajectory by altering the initial bullet's shape. Interesting. Not necessarily useful, but I'm not so confident it won't be that it looks like I'm going to practice that a bit more. The mana cost was still worse and he could materialize from and shoot from any angle instead of trying to play with how his shots would hit the wind, but the fact that the attempt netted him a level showed it had potential. And it wasn't like He'd lose anything but a bit of time doing that, so for the rest of the time He'd devoted to practice that day was spent getting a feel for how different shapes would move through the air, taking that information in on the off chance it might show its use later. I hate everything about this. It's fine, Myriad. Chill. I refuse. I hate that you thought of this. It's a new way to work on my skills while I'm up here and will boost my odds of survival overall. You should be thrilled I had this idea. Until you hit somebody. Your gods, you'll be fine. Myriad was less sure but didn't want to immediately refute him for the fear that Ben might want to put the idea to the test when he was already about to make the realm a lot more dangerous given what he intended. Up until then, Ben had treated his actualization rather casually as he had raised it to mastery. Sure, He'd make buildings and food to practice it and was more than content to use it to lift and move things, letting him read in a fashion nearly similar to how he would back on the world minus his homunculi, but during his practice with Thera during the day, He'd come to the epiphany that there was no reason he couldn't use it to keep training two skills in particular with it at night, both his marksmanship and his aim, and with that idea firmly in his head he was eager to put it to the test. Without wind resistance, there was no way for him to keep up the tests He'd been doing earlier in the day, but that didn't matter to him. He had no issue with working on his ability to shoot in a straight line, so he got Myriad to create moving targets for him as he produced small ball bearings, firing them off and watching them strike. I'm good for this distance, move them back about twice as far. I need to put some effort in if I want this to get me any levels. Still having misgivings, his god did as he was asked, pushing back the target as Ben took his next shots, feeling his aim get worse for the distance as he pushed himself to improve, firing out a barrage of bullets. I'm mostly hitting, but it's definitely harder. Just keep aiming for the center. The fact that it was a challenge helped make it fun as he kept going, ignoring Myriad's discomfort while he felt himself slowly growing better with each attempt as he knew that the activity was going to become a main part of his nightly routine for a while to come, at least until he reached the 9th level of his two skills. It was a feeling Myriad wanted to complain about to no end, only holding back for the fact that Ben was right. This was a simple way for him to get some extra practice in a way that wouldn't disturb his other activities, leaving the god nothing to do but hope his mad apostle's curiosity wouldn't end up with him turning his attacks against him in the end. Why are we trying this again, Ben? Thera sighed. You do remember how well this turned out last time, right? I mean, yeah, but practice makes perfect. It will be good for your training and just as importantly, handy to me if you succeed. And what exactly am I doing here? Cecily asked, the guild master having been invited over to Sonia's home after she was done with her work for the day and was left standing in the backyard, staring at the two, along with the sack of loose meat that was sitting between them, acting as a witness. If anyone happens to come back here and see a dead body, it would be nice to have someone with some authority around to explain that everything's actually fine. I need significantly more explanation than that. It's nothing crazy, he explained. Thera needs some slightly broader practice with her life magic, and I wouldn't mind getting my hands on a few more clones to work through, with the answer to both of those things ending with homunculus creation. It's just if it doesn't work out, it can look a little suspect. And I'd like to remind you that I had no luck at all last time. Ben. Sure, but you've leveled your magic since then and have read up a ton on the topic too. You can't only focus on the healing aspects of your power, Thera. Gotta branch out a bit where you can. That would be a bit more believable if you so blatantly didn't want more hands to use. That's just a side benefit, he told her with a wink. Now come on, it will be great. He waggled the handle of a knife at her, which she eventually gave in and took before dragging it across his palm. Just no complaining about however much you get cut or stabbed. You hear me? Loud and clear, ma'am. No worries. It'll be nothing but grateful no matter how it turns out. He felt his blood start to condense and move in his palm under her power, eventually falling from his hand to the meat below as it began to incorporate it and grow before all of their eyes, not just eating what was there but moving on to devour the surrounding dirt and grass, taking it all in as it consumed the yard. I'll ask Sakhel to come help fix this later, Ben muttered, getting no reactions. Thera was too focused on her spell while Cecily was looking at it happen in disgust, yet unable to pull her eyes away as it grew, taking a form that was undeniably Ben before it all went wrong. Unauthorized use of content. If you find this story on Amazon, report the violation. Near the very end of its feeding frenzy, the body that had been produced could no longer support itself, the bit of life it had slipping away and leaving them with a nearly fully formed corpse. Okay, I see why you needed me here now, the guild master muttered, already envisioning a future where someone would see this and raise a fuss to the guards and the guild. Even if it was unlikely, with her there she could keep things from becoming a major issue. Thera, for her part, didn't care about any problems like that. She was feeling ecstatic. Compared to the last time Shed tried to do the same thing, Shed come so much closer in the end to her previous attempts that her early concern about it was gone, replaced with motivation as she started reaching out with the knife again to try once more. Yep, there's that scary level of enthusiasm. I deserve this. He was already feeling the cut of the blade through his skin as she tried again, making use of the body at their feet as it was consumed by her second attempt, the process repeating as cells split and grew as it ate, taking in more as flesh and bones formed while limbs grew out, and on only the second attempt, they had a success as the figure of Ben sat at their feet. All at once, Ben had Thera in his arms and spun her around, feeling every ounce of excitement that the bit of victory called for. Shed done it, but not only that, he now had an extra body to work with, bringing his total number of clones up to 5. And maybe a few more if she's willing to keep helping out. After all, my connect range has gotten big enough that I could easily have a dozen of me working in one spot, and that number's only going to grow if I get a couple more levels. Okay, decision made. I need a new work area because Falk's place isn't going to be able to support quite that many bends, and then assuming I survive the next wave I should take Connect Master so I can grow it more. As he was having these thoughts though, Thera instead focused on more practical concerns. Alright, before you get too excited you need to actually try it on and tell me how it feels. Alright, that's fair. Give me a second. He reached out with his Connect after she said it, filling the empty vessel with his soul and letting it act as an extension of himself, making it stand up and look around before performing some simple movements, jumping and stretching and swinging its arms, All as Ben took in everything it was while Thera waited for his assessment. Well, good enough to use but feels sickly, he admitted. Smithing might be a bit strenuous on it, but he'll be able to use it for stuff like wood and leather working, plus most arts and cooking. Overall, I'm happy with it though, don't let me sound like I'm not. This guy will see some good use. Even if he was happy with it though, his assessment meant that she wasn't. Now that Shed had some proper success, she knew she could do better, and without waiting she was already cutting into him again to try once more. After all, even if it was the evening, it wasn't exactly late. They had hours they could spend on practicing, slowly improving her technique until Shed gets something just as good as the original. All it was going to take was a little bit of flesh and blood. Ben, seeing all of this in the shine of Thera's eyes, once more renewed his determination to quietly take it. After all, I asked for this. Plus, it looks like it's actually getting some payoff compared to the last time, so I'm just going to take it for what it is. At the very least, looks like I won't have any issues getting a bunch of these made up. The long night of cuts and blood had paid off, leaving Ben with even more clones than Head hoped for, with Thera making him 10 new ones that were just about equal to the 4 Head gotten from the Great Life Spirit, all ready to be used, and making the matter of how Head do so into nothing more than a question of space at that point. If Ben fully reached out with his deep connection, Head be situated in the center of a circle that Head be able to reach out in roughly 6 meters in all directions, giving him a huge range that he could put towards training his crafting and other skills with all of those extra hands. Which means I just need to go get myself the space for that. It was the sort of thing he wanted to put to work sooner than later, and he wanted the convenience that would come with it. So to bring his goal to fruition, he passed through his mini-gate, happy to beg a couple of the greatest resources in his life for help. I was hoping to buy a place in Analia, he said as he invaded Pelania and a brus meal together, even if he got a bright reaction from Pelania for the statement. Oh? Thinking of making a little family home for you and my daughter? It would almost certainly be nicer than Stonewall. Closer to a gate and more to do too. Not to mention safer with the rest of the family here too. No. I needed a bit more space for making my own workshop. Finally leaving that old ape then? It's about time. And you picked an excellent place to start your new life in, I approve. Still no, I was just going to drop a mini-gate there to use the extra space so I don't take up every inch of Falk's place. Boo, but fine, the Queen said, clear in her disappointment as she waved a servant down. Alencia, be a dear and help Ben find a place that fits his criteria. Would you? Yes, Your Majesty. You're the best, Pelania. You can thank me by dragging my daughter and sister down for a few dinners sometime soon if you're not going to bother just outright moving here. Will do. After outlining what he was specifically looking for as far as space went, the servant Alencia moved with prompt efficiency, sending for different real estate brokers within the city to come to them and present available properties that might match his options, and landing on a previously empty warehouse. Something that would give him more than enough space to work as his skill would grow while he looked it over and took it all in, feeling plans form as he did. The narrative has been taken without authorization. If you see it on Amazon, report the incident. Since Connect stretches out in all directions, I could easily get a few more clones squeezed in here by adding a few platforms for some to work on to make even more stuff, but that's going to be a future project. For now, I've just got to move a gate here along with having some supplies sent over as well on top of all of the tools I'm going to need. Definitely going to take a few long hours of setup, but nothing else to do but get started, right? Once the plan was formed, the day became straightforward, even if tiring from there as it turned to a rush. First going back to the shop to throw together a new mini-gate and carrying it through Analia after it was constructed, dropping it off to let him go back and forth more easily once that was done as he dragged things through and materialized whatever he needed to when he had the mana to spare, slowly building up the place into a proper workshop for him to enjoy with everybody at his disposal and indulge in his numerous crafts. As much as he enjoyed his smithing and as much as it was what the world needed, he didn't want to be doing that alone. It was taking up untold hours of each day, so to balance that out, he also wanted to enjoy other things too. Painting, drawing, sculpting, wood, stone, and leather working and more, not to mention all of the cooking He'd need to do to ensure he could keep all of the homunculi fed and alive. This was going to be his place to indulge in it all with everything He'd be doing, making a smile stretch across his face as his mind's already rushed while plans formed and danced across his thoughts. By the time Head finished as much as he could after filling and organizing the place, it was late in Stonewall, enough that he wasn't expecting any encounters when he got back but found Falk waiting for him, looking at the new gate in his business with open suspicion. "And what exactly is this, boy?" "Gate to my new workshop," he said innocently, getting a shake of the head for his response. "If you're going to go out on your own, then do it completely. Cut the cord and start your own place. Gods know you're more than good enough by now. Don't wanna, and more importantly, this is just because I needed extra space. Even if you're off doing who knows what, I had a few new bodies made so things would feel pretty tight in here if I didn't get a bit more room. You really do the weirdest crap, you know that? Hey, it's called efficiency, it's great. Scares the customers a bit though. You're away often enough that the shop's barely open, Mr. Future God. Speaking of, what has you so busy this time?" Finishing a project. They'll take you out to see it when it's done. Or you could take me now." "No." "Aw, come on, why?" "Because it's late and I feel like if I let you see it before it's done, then you're gonna hound me about it until it is and you have your own work to be doing." "True but lame." "Fine, but my curiosity is raised, Falk. I've got high expectations here." Be patient for a few days, boy, and then he'll have them blown away." "So, what did you need me for today?" Thera asked as Ben and his clones were swarming her, moving her arms and legs and eyeing measurements as they did. "Getting you outfitted. Now that the rest of the day's work is done, you're my main project for the time being." "Okay, why though?" "Better safe than sorry," he shrugged. "I don't exactly want you needing something while we're at the invasion points and not having it, hence getting as much of that sorted out now while we can. That means duplicate armors and staves and a couple other things." She looked at him through narrowed eyes. "What couple other things?" "Don't worry about it," he told her as amongst the flurry of activity going on around them, one of the homunculi very clearly dropped a pile of mind circlets into a spatial bag. "What matters right now is getting a few copies of your armor made up in case anything goes wrong, as well as a pile of staves. I don't exactly anticipate you breaking your current one, but this is one of those better to have it and not need it situations. I'm thinking 10 of each to be on the safe side." "That feels like overkill." "Probably, but that's why it's called the safe side. I can imagine a world where things get bad enough you somehow manage to break a couple staves in that time. But 10? Absolutely not. Anyway, you've been using both for a while now. Anything I could improve for anything you use?" "No, it's all comfortable, so just more of the same will be fine." "Okay, cool, that makes things easy." With nothing to change, his many bodies began to move, taking advantage of the new workspace Head bought as they split themselves up between the tasks, with Thera not looking at the staff or armor groups, but instead the third, not doing any smithing but instead focusing on alchemy. "So what are they up to then?" "Just an experiment, 1 second," he told her as the first vial of mystery liquid was complete, downing it and judging its results. Doesn't taste terrible, which is a plus, and I don't seem poisoned, which is another, although I'm supposedly poison-proof enough that I'm not really the best person to use as a standard for that. As for its effects, he materialized as much rainbow mana crystal as he could, bringing his total pool to its bottom before counting how long it would take to refill and finding it took only a little over 5 minutes, a bit less than half his normal rate, telling him the potion Head modified was performing better than expected. All that was left was making sure it would be safe for Thera's consumption. "Here, drink this, but keep an eye on yourself for a while afterwards. I'm not expecting any serious side effects, but it never hurts when trying something new." She did as he asked, downing it without any immediate reaction and leaving Ben to focus on what to worry about next. Once he was confident he hadn't just poisoned her. "So with that done, the other way to make sure your mana regen gets another boost would be some light enchanted equipment, but at the same time you'll be passing through a hospital every time you move from one point to another. There's definitely going to be light mages there, so we could just get them to buff your rates instead." "Okay, that sounds like a plan. Other than that, I don't exactly know the quality of food we're going to have to deal with, so I'll prepare some time-enchanted boxes to hold some fresh meals, and other than that, maybe work on something for yourself?" Thera told him, nodding to his jacket. "I know you like it, Ben, but it doesn't exactly hold up well. The author's content has been appropriated. Report any instances of this story on Amazon. Against all of the assholes with awakened skills that have tried to kill me, it would work fine otherwise. Well, seeing as how you have no say in who's going to try and kill you, maybe it's something you could work on a bit?" Okay, fine, point taken, I'll work on it when I'm done here. He didn't mind giving it an upgrade, he'd just need to think a bit on how he wanted to do it. But that would be a later problem. He was happy to focus entirely on what he'd need to get set up for Thera for the time being, only stopping that bit of work when his teacher popped his head through the gate between the two workshops. You two have a spare minute? We can. What's up, Fok? I told you I'd show you what I was working on when it was done, and now it is, so come on. He didn't need to say another word. It took everything Ben had to make sure his homunculi were comfortably put away in their cases instead of letting them drop to the ground then, and there as he rushed out to follow his teacher, Thera joining out of her own curiosity as to what someone at the third tier could have been working on. As they went to the main gate network and passed through to the magic towers, it took all Ben had to keep himself contained instead of bouncing and jumping through the streets in anticipation before they seemingly arrived at their destination. A warehouse, much the same as what Ben had bought for himself, only swarmed with workers and guards and officials from churches all over to manage strict control of who could get in or out, not that it was a problem for them. With Fok as the one in charge of the facility, no one was going to question who he saw fit to bring along, nor did they have the authority to. As the holder of a skill at its third tier, he arguably had more international power than the leaders of most nations. That was how highly his achievement was respected and valued. And getting in didn't disappoint. The second they were inside, Ben immediately was able to see the dense tangle of enchantments taking up most surfaces around them as he instantly began trying to decipher their purpose, rushing from place to place as he took it all in with no mind paid to the people trying to work around him. Well? Fok asked, sounding amused as he wondered if his student would be able to get it himself, with that same student breathlessly giving the answer to its purpose. Enchanting factory. For weapons specifically. Holy crap, no wonder you were so busy. Ben already knew that third-tier skill holders could create a structure of enchantments that could further enchant on specific items it was placed on, with the only example he knew of being the cards throughout the world that let people see their status. But it appeared his teacher had just changed that in a huge way. Throughout the building were a series of divots that weapons of all shapes and sizes could be placed in to be enchanted upon, and not waiting for permission, Ben materialized a spearhead that would fit one of them before inserting it and taking it out to see what would be created. High ultra rare for something that wasn't even properly forged and with no alchemic enhancers either. Looks like the only reason it won't be producing legendary items is because it needed to accommodate the fact that there isn't going to be the sort of consistency between any weapons it works on that you'd get from having one consistent shape over and over again like the cards. Still, goddamn, this is going to be huge. Man, I want to be able to do this so freaking bad. He could only imagine everything he'd be able to make if he ever got to that level himself. Weapons and tools that could reshape the world as they knew it if only he could get the skill to pull it off. I want to go enchant something right this second. God, Fok, I need the world to win just so I'll have a chance to get to this point one day, Ben sighed. Give me an extra decade of life to make it happen. That's all I ask. And as bizarre as it is to hear that's the reason you want the world surviving in the end, I'll admit I'm pretty proud, his teacher laughed. It's all been tested, so we know it works, and it starts up in earnest tomorrow. Before you know it, the world's gonna be flooded with my works. I'll bet. I am so insanely jealous. Considering the enchantments would go down on it almost instantly, Ben could only imagine how much would be going through that building in a single day. Tens of thousands of pieces didn't seem unreasonable, but the limiting factor was going to be how many items they'd be able to make to enchant upon, meaning the total would probably drop a bit below its maximum potential. Except they'll probably have stuff sent from all over the world to be enchanted here. Damn, that's going to be a lot. Meaning all that's left is what I can do for myself. Just seeing it was raising his competitive spirit. Ben wanted to improve. He always did, of course, but then and there he wanted to do more. He wanted to catch up to his teacher, to match that level of enchanting and apply it to his own work, and his mind was already rushing to figure out how to get there.